morning, everyone, and welcome to the Board of Supervisors meeting here on September 24th, 2013. And can we all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance led by Supervisor Barrios?
Ready, salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Can I have a motion for a certificate of posting?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. This morning we have one presentation that's be made by Supervisor Barrios. Supervisor?
Do we need to make a motion? This is a proclamation. I'll make a motion to approve this proclamation.
Second.
Mr. Chair.
And I have a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none. Supervisor?
Yeah, do we have a representative here from the San Benito Health Foundation? Representing this proclamation of Binational Health Week, and it's really important for us to know that we have really partnered with a lot of other secretaries of foreign relations, including Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala, and the University of California. Of course, it's not a nation, but it is certainly a partner with us. And this is to provide public health information to the Latino community at the U.S.-Mexican border and throughout the state of California. Very important, especially during these times where we have a lot of travel, people joining and partnering, traveling to other countries, that we are cognizant of the fact that health is very important and that we take care of ourselves. And so at this time, I would like to present this to you for the Binational Health Week. Would you like to say a few words? Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
This year, our binational health event will be celebrated in San Juan Bautista. I did bring some invitation as well, so I hope to see you there. We'll be here till from 4 to 7 p.m.
Okay.
on October 18th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a presentation by our Assemblyman Aleo, and I don't see him here yet, but when he does arrive, we'll stop our meeting where we're at and allow him the opportunity to give his legislative update. And so, you know, he's making a stop here, and the time that he has, I'm sure, is quite valuable, so we'll try to accommodate our Assemblyman. But in the meantime, we'll go ahead and move forward with, I guess we did that, public comment. Do we have any items on the agenda, I mean, in public comment that is not on today's agenda?
Do. First speaker is Marvin Jones.
Mr. Chairman, thank you again. Today we'll just review some of the things we've learned in the last several months. If you recall, the United Nations Convention on Biodiversity that wants to sequester, in effect, about half of the world. Here's a map of the United States. They want to sequester about half of the world. Red areas are where people are not to go unless they're a member of the food chain. And the yellow areas are very restrictive. It rained last weekend. California got away there. Sorry about that. But anyway, the biodiversity folks say that people shouldn't be in the red areas, and they even have little connecting corridors from one red area to another. That's pretty important for them to have those corridors. We had United Nations in their Agenda 21 as a local planning guide for you folks even. For the sustainability is their big watchword. And it was Marie Strong that was one of the Secretary Generals of one of these conferences, the one in Rio, I believe, said the one way to determine what is sustainable is to realize what is not sustainable. He said it is not sustainable for the grazing of livestock, plowing of soil, home appliances, your dishwashers and your clothes dryers, air conditioners, single-family dwellings, reservoirs. They're not sustainable according to the United Nations Agenda 21. Oh, remember giving y'all an article, a Canadian article, about the sequestration of Florida, where the article said that, 27% of Florida is already in the red area. So they're getting closer to their 50%. It's one of the better states, if you will, for keeping people out of climate change. There was an article a couple of weeks ago about methane. Oh, methane, it's very good at absorbing infrared radiation. Turns out it was at less than 2 parts per million, almost in the noise range when you compare it to carbon dioxide at 400 parts per million. Another good greenhouse gas is water vapor. Last weekend when it rained, we probably had 20,000 parts per million water vapor absorbing infrared radiation. And we're all upset because carbon dioxide has gone from 325 up to 400 parts per million, just almost noise level. Gave you an English article. It was published last fall, where global temperature has been constant for the last 16 years. And this has not been a hot summer and cold winters predicted. The Arco Buoy project, the one that for measuring the temperature gradients of the ocean. I gave you the article there of 3,500 buoys floating around the ocean. And if there's any difference in ocean temperature, it's in the noise level again, but if the ocean temperature is changing, it's cooling. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jones.
Next time we'll have an exam.
Okay, thank you.
Martha Booker.
And as a reminder, Dr. Jones knows, and I hope everybody else knows, we try to keep our comments to 3 minutes. May you repeat the name?
Martha Booker.
Marshall Booker? Not here.
Mark Patton.
Good morning.
First of all, thank you for letting me speak. And my name is Mark Patton. I work at the Behavioral Health Department, one of the therapists over there, and one of the community members here in Hollister. I'm just speaking about the current issue we're at with the MOU and the proposed cuts and such, and I just wanted to touch on a couple things. One is the reason that I'm still here after 17 years. I came to work for the county about 17 years ago. I was in private practice in Salinas. Somebody came to me and said, hey, there's a great position out in Hollister. They have a fantastic benefit plan, a really nice retirement system. You ought to check it out. So I came out and I applied, and I have been in this position for 17 years. I guess my point here is we shouldn't make promises we can't keep. I was promised a benefit package and a retirement that is now being threatened. I don't feel like the same would be ethical or true if I, as a behavioral health worker or crisis worker for some of your family members, or a therapist working with your children, or your postpartum daughter who's just had a baby, or somebody, to say, oh yeah, gee, sorry, I promised to give good, solid services, but now I don't think I can. It just doesn't work that way. I think what we're talking about with some of the benefit proposals and some of the cuts is very, very serious attack on your own promises to workers and people like me who've stayed and who've tried to contribute to the longevity that this county can provide for itself and its workers, and it's eroding fast. I've watched multiple workers quit in our department, not because they were happy to retire, but because they left frustrated, watching their benefits cave in on them, finding better benefits in another department in another county, take the money and run. It's sad. So I'm here to appeal to you that we need to do something other than cut all those benefits and cut all those services, because you're the ones that's going to suffer. You know, if you have a family member who's suicidal, or if you have a child who's ADHD or a behavioral problem, you don't want the bottom of the barrel pick for therapists and clinicians and county workers. You might say that might be true with a different kind of service in our county, but I think in that department and some of the other health services that you're looking at this impacting, you're talking about a serious cut, not on us, but on yourself and the community service we have. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much for your time. At this point, I'm going to continue the public comment period and go back to our agenda item that I see our Assemblyman has just walked in, and I don't want to take up more of his valuable time than necessary. We really thoroughly enjoy having the opportunity to listen to what's going on in Sacramento and the visit by Assemblyman Aleo. And so at this time, I'll ask Assemblyman Aleo to the podium and offer up his legislative report. Thank you, Assemblyman, for taking the time this morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
I don't want to interrupt the public comments, as I know there's very important issues being discussed by members of the public, but thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and all the Board of Supervisors who have had the pleasure of working with all of you very closely on a wide range of issues. And I just wanted to come and, as I do every year, come and give a legislative report. Rather than expecting you to come to me, I always like to come to the different Board of Supervisors in all 9 city councils in my district. So I thank you for the limited time you're offering me here. But we ended our legislative session in Sacramento on September 13th. This is now my 3rd year in Sacramento, representing 500,000 people, all the way from Morgan Hill, all the way down to King City, including Santa Clara, Santa Cruz, Monterey, and San Benito counties. San Benito County is certainly always very special to me. As you know, I just got married 10 months ago and chose San Juan Bautista to get married, and my reception was held here in Hollister. So I'll always have Hollister in a special place in my heart. My wife is the vice mayor for the city of Watsonville, so we're both now in politics and enjoy really representing our constituents. And just a few days ago, we held a senior scam stopper event with numerous state agencies to make sure that we get great information to our seniors to avoid them being victims of fraud and scams that happen every day in our communities. And Supervisor Margie Barrios was there representing the Board of Supervisors. So I thank all of you for your leadership and your hard work and tough decisions that you have to make during these hard times. But I did want to come and give you just a brief report on some of the legislative accomplishments that we worked on this year. I have 11 bills pending on the governor's desk. He's already, actually 9, because he signed 2 already. And we expect that many of those bills are going to get signed, and that's a record number of bills. Usually my colleagues might get 2, 3, maybe 4 bills on the governor's desk, but getting 11 bills on some key policy issues, I think, is a great accomplishment. And certainly, I think, reflects the hard work, not only by me, but my collaboration with a lot of our locally elected officials, many of the different labor unions and local employees and community members and leaders who have supported the work that I've been doing up in Sacramento. But I just wanted to point out my local staff person, Brandy Garcia, from Gilroy, but she covers Gilroy and Hollister for me. So when I'm not here, when I'm up in Sacramento, she's my local staffer. In case any of you want to set up a meeting with my office, she's the person to go to. We're also passing out brochures that Brandy has just for community members if they need help from my office. Like I said, if sometimes community members have problems with the unemployment office or the DMV, my office is able to help with those state agency problems, and just want to offer that service to everyone. So anyways, this year I think we've had a successful year, certainly with Proposition 30 passing, thanks to the voters, the people of San Benito County. We were able to have a more balanced budget this year and really look to, for the first time in many years, having a rainy day fund of $1 billion in our state budget. But I think also the legislature has remained committed to remain fiscally disciplined, as we know that the economy is just recovering, that we can't spend more than what we have, and if we have a surplus, to really prioritize that in some key policy areas. And the governor and the Senate and the Assembly limited those areas to K-12 education, higher ed, and healthcare as primary areas where, if we have a little bit more money, restore some of the major cuts that we've had to do over the last 3 years. But on the education side, 2 big areas that we approved this year were, one, the middle class scholarship that will now, for the first time in many years, provide some relief for families who are sending their kids to college. So if your family makes $100,000 or less a year, you will now qualify for this middle class scholarship, and it would provide up to a 40% reduction in your tuition, either at the CSU system or the University of California system. So at our public universities, you will have a significant decrease. in the tuition costs for our families. And I think that's our commitment to keeping that American dream, to send our young people off to college to get a good education, as they're our next generation of leaders in business and in health and law and education, a wide range of policy areas. But along with that, we also voted to reform school finance. And basically what resulted of that is that every school district keeps the base level of funding that they have. But for those districts that have higher numbers of economically disadvantaged students, students who come from low-income families, or students who are still English learners, learning to become proficient in English, or other students that have other needs, the new school funding formula provides for additional funding for those school districts. So that certainly includes school districts such as Hollister's school district and others in my assembly district. And as a result, many school districts have had an increase in funding, sometimes in the millions of dollars. I know Pajaro Valley and Watsonville has an additional funding of $6 million this year alone because of their demographics, and also the new funding formula that provides for that additional funding for those school districts. So I think that's a great thing and a reflection of our commitment to our school districts. But also, we also championed a bill in the healthcare area this year. It's one of my bills, AB 900. That bill specifically came from Hazel Hawkins Hospital. And in regards to their units that take care of our most vulnerable seniors, these are under state law called skilled nursing facilities. And this is when families such as here in San Benito County, if your elderly parents or your grandparents cannot no longer be able to live independently, they need that specialized care, but because you're working, you have other commitments in your life, you need to send them to a local place that could provide quality care for them. Our local area, our local hospital is Hazel Hawkins. There may be south and maybe north units, but they were at risk of closing down along with 50 other 8 skilled nursing hospitals throughout the state. So this bill is one that I worked on closely with SEIU, the California Hospital Association, the California Medical Association, all the associated representing the doctors throughout the state, to restore this 10% cut on Medi-Cal cuts that the state enacted. So my bill originally was trying to restore all 10% cuts for Medi-Cal providers across the state. But in the end, it got narrowed down only to these skilled nursing facilities, because that's, in the negotiations, that's what the Assembly Appropriations Committee only allowed my bill to address. And in the end, my bill got held up in Assembly Appropriations, but the governor, through administrative action, restored that 10% cut through the Department of Health and Human Services. So that will provide continued funding for Hazel Hawkins and Mima Memorial Hospital in King City to keep millions of dollars coming into this community to keep that center open and provide those quality services. Without maybe north and maybe south here in Hollister, local family members would have to send their families up to San Jose or perhaps even further away, which makes it difficult to interact with your parents or your grandparents when you get out of work or on weekends, you know. So that was, I think, a huge legislative accomplishment for Hazel Hawkins, and I think its CEO, Ken Underwood, for really working closely. And Hollister really became the highlight of why that Medi-Cal cut restoration was important for the legislature to support. So I thank the local residents of Hollister for even going up and testifying in the committee and going up and holding a press conference with me up in Sacramento. On another legislative issue, there's a big challenge throughout California with making sure families have clean drinking water. And I'm the chairman of the Assembly Environmental Safety and Toxic Materials Committee, and we've made it our priority this year to ensure the promise or fulfill the promise that the governor signed 2 years ago, saying that it's the right of every Californian to have the human right to safe drinking water. And it sounds like something so simple, but the State Water Board did a study showing that over 2 million Californians pay for drinking water, but when it goes to their tap, they cannot use it because it has contaminants in it, and some of those very toxic. It might be benzene, it might be arsenic, it might be nitrates in the water, so they cannot use it for cooking, they cannot use it for drinking, and in some cases they can't even use it for taking a shower, yet they're paying for it to be delivered to their homes. So this year I passed a series of bills. 3 of them are sitting on the governor's desk right now. One of them is AB 21. It creates this new safe drinking water grant program for economically disadvantaged communities. It's going to appropriate $50 million so communities could apply for it, but it offsets the cost to local residents. If your local community has to implement a filtration system, sometimes it's in the millions of dollars, and what that results is in your water price skyrocketing. And sometimes for low-income families, that's unaffordable. It makes it almost impossible. So that's why we created this fund. So when communities could apply for these funds, it's a grant, and it keeps the cost down for helping Californians have safe drinking water. But we also had a separate bill that just streamlines the whole process because the California Department of Health is currently sitting on $455 million provided by the federal government to ensure that Californians have safe drinking water. And I've been very critical over the last year that one of our state agencies has been sitting on almost $500 million while Californians are going and living without safe drinking water in many parts of our state. So these regulations are trying to streamline the process so you get that money out faster and help communities that are in need. And lastly, we even, a separate bill just streamlined the process for other technologies that are currently available, but state law will not allow them to be implemented in local households. So if your water coming into your house was contaminated and you wanted to put a filtration system before the water comes into your home or on the tap, in-home treatment devices, state law prohibited, made it too bureaucratic, very difficult for people like here in San Benito County to be able to implement that type of technology. Well, this streamlines that. That gets rid of all that bureaucracy. That allows that technology to be used, especially in rural areas throughout California. But two last things I wanted to mention were two of my biggest legislative accomplishments this year, and I've been coming here before you over the last 3 years to let you know about these two particular bills. One is Assembly Bill 60, and this is the big debate statewide. It recently got attention by the New York Times, the LA Times, the Washington Post, BBC Radio. And this was my bill to allow an opportunity for undocumented immigrants to obtain a driver's license. And like I always tell people, it's not being granted, rather they have an opportunity to earn it. They still have to provide several documents to make sure they qualify, but they also have to pass the written exam just like everyone else. They have to pass the driving test to prove they can operate a motor vehicle. And they also have to have auto insurance just like everyone else. And I think after all the research that has come out, including a DMV study that came out in February, it showed that unlicensed drivers on the road are 3 times more likely to be involved in a fatal accident. So whether you're undocumented or you're a citizen or a lawful permanent resident, all of us are impacted by that, by the fact that we know that there's over 1 million drivers on the road that drive to work every day because they have to go to work, they have to provide for their families, they go to church, they go to the store, but because they're legally not allowed to apply for a driver's license, they're on the road. And so we had to ask ourselves a big question: is it a smarter policy to make sure that people learn the rules of the road, that they know how to operate a vehicle, and that they have insurance, so that when they are involved in an accident, there's coverage, and in the end, we concluded that it's in the best interest to allow that opportunity. So much so that for the first time ever, I was able to negotiate with law enforcement, and we won the first endorsement by the California Police Chiefs Association, including many of our local police chiefs actually sent a letter in support of AB 60. So this law goes into effect no later than January 1st of 2015. The DMV has assured me that they're aiming even for an earlier date of September, October of next year, so almost a year from now. The DMV said they needed at least a year to prepare because they expect at least 1 million people to come in and apply during that first year, and they need to open additional offices. They need to train additional staff. But this cost is going to be borne by those applying for the license. So it might cost a little bit more to apply for the license, but the state, because of our budget situation, had to pass on that cost to the applicants. But in the end, if you have to pay a little bit more and it avoids you from getting your car impounded, getting arrested in front of your family, and perhaps being placed in deportation proceedings because you get booked at the local jail and then you got an immigration hold for not having something so basic as a driver's license, I think that's a smart policy. But California isn't the first state to do this. We're now the 10th state. Just in the last year, it was Illinois, it was Oregon, Nevada by a Republican governor, Colorado, Maryland, Vermont, Connecticut, even our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., have all enacted this policy. So we look forward to the governor doing a bill signing ceremony no later than October 13th. So It's going to be signed in the next few days. And then lastly, the other big bill was my minimum wage bill, which is controversial, but nonetheless, it's an issue that I think is reasonable because the minimum wage in California has not been raised for 6 years now, and it stayed at $8 an hour. And we all know that over the last 6 years, the prices of gas, of food, of clothing, rent, utility bills has all gone up except the minimum wage. And if anyone who's lived on $8 an hour can attest how hard it is to survive on that, even more so if you're providing for 2 or 3 children in your family. So, so this has been a very tough bill for me up there in Sacramento. It's not been easy. It's a heavy lift. But all of a sudden, the governor came out that he was very supportive of the bill. In fact, he's actually signing the bill tomorrow morning in Los Angeles, where I will be with him at that bill signing ceremony. And it will raise the minimum wage up to $10 an hour in the state of California over 2 steps. Starting July 1st, 2014, it will go up from $8 to $9 an hour. And then 18 months later, on January 1st, 2016, it will go from $9 to $10 an hour, putting California in the lead with the highest minimum wage in the country. Right. So anyways, but it's just a fulfillment to some of my constituents here who have been asking just for a reasonable relief. The business community told me that they were most in opposition to the cost of living adjustment that I used to have in my bill, which is an automatic cost of living in future years. As inflation goes up, the minimum wage goes up. So we just balance that out by having a compromise bill that will be signed tomorrow by the governor. So I just wanted to mention those few points. I think they were big accomplishments because they did get a lot of nationwide press. And then just the last issue wasn't a bill, it was just a resolution just on comprehensive immigration reform. In fact, I'm going next week to Washington, D.C. with the Silicon Valley Leadership Group, which is the whole coalition of CEOs of high-tech and biotech industries in the Silicon Valley. But I'm also going with several agricultural leaders, especially from the Strawberry Commission in California. So it's ag, it's high-tech and biotech, and it's legislators going together to do a last push to see if we could convince our members of Congress to enact comprehensive immigration reform. There's only about 2 weeks left in the congressional session. If it doesn't happen now, I think it's going to be a big setback for many more years to get to where we're at today. And that's certainly a big issue for local residents, for our agricultural industry here locally, and for a lot of other industries, hotels and restaurant industries, to make sure that we pass comprehensive immigration reform. So with that said, I just want to say thank you for your service, and thank you for letting me report some of the highlights of this year. And certainly if you have any questions, I'd like to take those and have a brief presentation to make to one of your local businesses after any questions that you may have. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions from the board members or?
Just appreciation, Mr. Chair, that he takes the time to come out and present to our community. And I think the issues that you take on, very important. Finally, education is being looked at as a necessary thing that needs to help us for the future of our kids. So thank you for taking those things on. So
Thank you,
appreciate it.
Supervisor Barrios.
Yeah, on behalf of the board, I also want to express that as well. And I do have a couple of comments. I appreciate the work that you did with the 900 bill. That was really, really important to this community, and I think most of us on this board recognize that. And the hospital district was absolutely probably really relieved, and the people that need the service, and that was almost gone without that. That is quite a relief to us that got through. And as you could see, some of the folks here in our gallery are a lot of them are IHSS workers, health and human services folks. And do you see the state kind of, you know, we're more of a pass-through oversight for some of the state mandated programs. Do you see additional cuts coming down the road, or are we going to start seeing that these services are be revamped up at the state level?
Well, with the governors, with the budget that we passed last June, our projections from the Legislative Analyst's Office and Department of Finance all show a surplus in the next 5 years. So we shouldn't be seeing additional cuts. We should be actually seeing a restoration in these key priority areas. But I say that with caution because I think the governor made a message, and so did the Speaker of the Assembly and President Pro Tem of the Senate, saying, yes, we have additional funds coming into the state but it's a temporary proposal. Prop 30 is only for the next 5 to 7 years. So it's a temporary tax that the voters approved, so it's not going to last around for forever. But in these next several years, we have to really prioritize with that additional money that we get, what priority areas we want to spend that money in, and really be very careful how we spend that money, not spend more than what we have. And I think that's reflected in the budget, that we added that rainy day fund, and only limited areas where we're restoring some money. Schools was critical because they were devastated in billions of dollars in cuts. But there's other areas that we also need to look at. I know you guys have some challenges with in-home support services. I'm a big champion for that in Sacramento because they do care for our most elderly, and it does save our state billions of dollars each year by having people be able to live at home and somebody assisting them with their everyday needs. But I think we should be seeing a lot more relief over the next years, and hopefully more to our cities that have also taken, cities and counties that have taken a big hit, from loss of redevelopment to many other requirements that the state has imposed. And I hope that as the economy recovers and gets better, that you also provided more relief so that you have more funding to address the issues that were being raised here before I got here. So I'm confident that it'll get better, but we're going to be taking it every year. The governor will come out with his new budget proposal in January again, so we'll be able to see what is his ideas and thoughts for the next fiscal year as well.
Thank you. And the last comment I have, I'll be the first one to admit, being a small business owner in agriculture, I was kind of not overly enthused about the raising of the minimum wage. But in all actuality, there's nobody that works for me that works for less than $10 an hour right now. And, our county has an unemployment rate that's pretty excessive, always has been. Being an agricultural community, you tend to have that. But do you think, possibly by raising a minimum wage that some of those folks that are perennially on unemployment that might go out and work and earn $1 because the additional increase of opportunity in making a fair wage, is that part of the motivation that you had when you decided to push this?
No, it wasn't, but certainly all these different concerns came up in our debates and deliberations in Sacramento. And what I tell people is that I didn't base it on emotion or something that felt good. We looked at the evidence. We looked at studies that have been done on the minimum wage over the last several years, not only other states, but also local jurisdictions that have enacted minimum wage ordinances higher than the state-based minimum wage. So we looked at our neighboring states. Nevada is already at $8.25. Oregon's at $8.95. State of Washington is at $9.19 an hour, the highest state minimum wage in the country. And we looked at whether there was any adverse impact to businesses or families or jobs. None, no evidence whatsoever. In fact, the economies in those states are doing fairly well. And then we looked at local jurisdictions. San Francisco has added minimum wage, I think, since 2008. They're at $10.55 an hour, the highest in the country. And same concerns came out, whether it was going to have an adverse impact on jobs in San Francisco. They did a study on San Francisco, if you go to San Francisco, very vibrant and growing economy, very strong. And most recently, San Jose enacted a $10 minimum wage with the cost of living adjustment. It was enacted through the voters on a ballot initiative, and that was started in March of this year. And so far since March, there hasn't been any adverse impact in the city of San Jose. But I think the main reason why economists say there is an adverse impact is because when families make more, especially those that are just surviving on $8 an hour, when they make a little bit more, they don't have the luxury to save that and put that money away. They end up spending it eating at local restaurants, buying groceries, paying their bills, paying their rent. So all that money gets reinvested back into the economy, and it increases consumer spending as well, which is critical to a recovering economy, that you increase consumer spending. So I didn't testify because I'm not an expert on economics, but we brought experts from UC Berkeley and UC Santa Cruz that came to testify based on the research and data why it's helpful to California's economy.
Okay. Lastly, I certainly want to, not only for you taking the time this morning, but I know all of us have experienced that you made yourself available so much to the citizens of San Bernardino County and myself even personally as far as talking some of the transportation issues. 156 improvement project. We appreciate your support and continued support for that project, and we look forward to working with you going into the future. I know Supervisor Rivas has a
Right.
question. Or
Yeah, and I also want to express my appreciation not only for your ledge update, but really for your accessibility. I think it can't be overlooked, and by our local residents that you do have a local office here at the Briggs Building, and your staff is always kind and accessible. When we have problems, with the state, whether it be with the DMV or some other agency, your office is always available, and I think it's important for local residents to know that as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Supervisor Rivas.
Thank you very much, and well, come back again. We're allowed what? Oh, you have a presentation. I apologize.
Right. Well,
we'll move on to the presentation. That's
Yeah,
right.
we
You
have
did mention that.
We won't make it that much longer, but we only choose one, in regards to our local businesses, we only choose, every year we choose one local business to be our business of the year. They have an event in Sacramento, but sometimes it's difficult for our local business to go up all the way up there to do that when they're so busy running their business. But this year we wanted to come before the San Benito County Board of Supervisors and present one of your outstanding local businesses who I have chosen as the only business I'm recognizing as the small business of the year for all 4 counties, covering my 500,000 constituents. And about a year and a half ago, I did a tour of this business, and I was just left so impressed that you have some great business leaders that not only think of themselves and their families, they think about many other families in the community and the community itself. And this is a remarkable story. It's, this year's awardee is Royal Circuit Solutions, which is, I think, one of the last remaining circuit board manufacturers here in California. We used to be the hub because we have the Silicon Valley nearby, but many of those have moved offshore. They've taken those jobs to China, other foreign countries, but Royal Circuit Solutions has invested here in California and in California workers, and in particular here in San Benito County and in Hollister. So I wanted to take a moment to commend them because, is Milan Shah here? Oh, yes, right here, Milan Shah, and his family is here. We wanted to present them with our Small Business of the Year award. You could come up here and join me. Give them a round of applause for this recognition. But when I did a tour of the place, it's just fascinating. High technology, these printed circuit boards, the latest technology to manufacture these. But what has made them be able to stay in business is that they do a quick turnaround. If there's a company that needs something in 24 hours, they can get it done overnight, send it the next day, or whatever short time frame that they have. They can't do that when they're printing or manufacturing something overseas, So this company at one point was at risk of closing down here in Hollister. It was financially struggling. Some of the workers that Milan knew came and talked to him, and since 2008, they have tripled their number of workers here in Hollister, all good paying jobs, many of them people who had previously done other types of work, many of them Latino and a pretty diverse workforce there. But now they've tripled their workforce, and they have increased their profits tenfold since 2008 because of his great business skills and his experience. He's previously worked with Sony and Apple computers. So you have a great company here in Hollister, but it's just a shining example of people who are doing the right thing and investing in our local families and in our local economy and contributing to bringing more jobs and other manufacturers here to Hollister. So they're like a shining example. And certainly he's always looking for ways to give back. He's starting a scholarship soon to give back scholarships to local school districts and students so that they could reach their full potential as well. So with that said, on behalf of the state legislature, this is signed by both me and Senator Anthony Canella, my good friend who represents San Benito County as well. We wanted to recognize Royal Circuit Solutions as the 2013 Small Business of the Year. Thank you very much. Felicidades. All right. If you could say something as well. And just have a small token of our appreciation from the State Assembly, too, something to put on your desk as well. And if you could share some words with us, too.
Sir, thank you. Honorable Assemblymen, Honorable Board of Supervisors, Mr. Chairman, and community members. It's a great honor and privilege to receive this honor, and we will be sure to share it with all the employees and the suppliers and the people that make a difference. As the Assemblyman pointed out, this company is about 20 years old. We bought it about 5 years ago. It unfortunately was on its deathbed. And the workers did come and talk to me and convince me that they have the skill set. They just needed some resources and some fresh ideas. And my wife and I made a few trips and decided to invest. We also spoke to the city manager then, Mr. Clint, at that time, and he also assured us that Hollister City is going to be of great support. And 5 years later, as the Assemblyman pointed out, we have actually not tripled, but quadrupled the workforce. And we're still hiring. We're hoping to add another building. We're right next to the Department of Land Management across from the airport, 21 Hamilton Court. So if anybody's looking for a good job, please. And by the way, we're hiring veterans. That's the other thing that we've started. We're hiring veterans.
Great.
But more importantly, the city of Hollister has been an unbelievable support. No nonsense, very supportive. The county, San Benito County, has been extremely supportive. And it's just nothing but plus, plus, plus in our mind as far as investors go. And the people of Hollister, San Benito County, in terms of workers and supplier base, very honest, full of integrity, very hardworking, and we're very blessed. So thank you for your support. Thank you for your kind words, sir.
Thank you very much. We can take a picture in the middle. Yeah. If you permit us, we just want to take a picture in front of the
Okay,
supervisor.
sure.
Yeah. I'll take off my glasses.
Great. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Assemblyman, and that was a great presentation. I know it made everybody's day, and that's what makes California strong is our jobs and our businesses, and we look forward to growing in the future, and with the help of the state legislature and local government working in partnership, that's what we're to do. Thank you very much, Assemblyman. We'll move on and continue on with the public comment. We have any further speaker cards for?
Michael Silverman.
Again, if we keep our comments to 3 minutes. Thank you.
Well, that's a tough act to follow, but I'll do my best. My name's Michael Silverman. I'm an agricultural inspector biologist 3 with San Benito County Ag Department. I'm also a member of SEIU 521. I'd like to start this morning by thanking the Board of Supervisors today for having the wisdom of a sunset clause on the furloughs that recently expired. Today, I could start saving for a house again, contributing more to my 457 plan, and look forward to the future with my wife. With the county's current proposal to the union, I'll have to set aside my future again because I'll be paying for the first time my full retirement contribution, health care for my wife and I, and prepare for the prospects of a wage cut. Dealing with each of these cuts one at a time is manageable because I had to deal with the furlough. But these proposed cuts are different. They are concurrent and permanent. I came to work for San Benito County because the benefits were better than the surrounding counties, even though the wage paid was less for the same work performed. I am not the only worker who chose to work for San Benito County because of these benefits. But like all workers, in light of the proposed cuts, I must revisit my decision. For me, the proposed cuts add up to the cost of a second rent, gas, and the food I spend weekly to commute from Fresno, where my wife attends nursing school. The proposed cuts will be hard to manage because they come at once. With San Benito County celebrating its 140th birthday, the opening of a new courthouse right across the street, our country's newest national park, Pinnacles, a very successful 4th of July motorcycle rally, and a phenomenal agricultural harvest in 2012, economically, things are looking up for the county, except for its workers. Why are the workers being left out of the economic rise of the county? Why are the workers being asked to sacrifice while the county continues to operate its business as usual? Why now, after 140 years, is the county leaving its workers behind, even as the feds, the state, we heard it from our assemblyman, tourists, and the largest industry, agriculture, prosper in our county? Today, I asked the Board of Supervisors to reconsider the proposed cuts to the workers by spreading out the 7% employee contribution to CalPERS from now until it's mandated by law in 2018. Repeal the proposed wage cut and give employees a true low-cost health care option for their families and spouse. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Nora. I can't really pronounce the last name. I don't want to try.
Sorry about that. We do the best we can with everybody's name.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Nora Hockman. I'm an organizer and representative with SEIU Local 521, working with the employees of San Benito County, joined here also this morning by ULTCW, struggling for good wages for home care workers as well. You know, it's a coincidence that our two unions are here together, joined by the same challenge, which is how to make money go around to the people that make the work and do the work that is defined as critical work for our community. So the piece of this that I really want to talk about is the revenue piece. You know, and you will hear from other workers the sacrifices that were made by county employees over the last 4 years have been stunning sacrifices that resulted in real financial impacts to their household incomes that put a lot of workers both to the test to remain as county employees and put a lot of workers to the street. The layoffs of the last couple of years were devastating for those families, and they were devastating for the county itself as an entity, and then very rough on remaining employees. So when we come to today, and when we come to these contract negotiations, and workers are again faced with the prospect that they are considered the sole source of revenue as the county continues to attempt recovery, we have to shift how we look at that. Workers cannot be the only source of revenue because there's nothing left to give. It's kind of just that simple. The bank's doors are closed for the workers. So then the question is, well, where does the county get the money, right? So you have before you, and have for some time, a consideration of a tax measure. We understand its complications. I want to really encourage you to take that responsibility for revenue very seriously and sooner than you might be thinking about it, because you have no other source of revenue. It is our collective responsibility to ensure that the county is strong financially and in terms of the work that's performed. But it is your sole responsibility to ensure that the county is appropriately funded. We encourage you to look at that tax measure for 2014. SEIU, as you know, is a full player politically and legislatively. We want to be involved in that measure, but we need for you to signal your support to make that happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nestor Rivera.
Hi, good morning, Chair and Supervisors. My name is Nestor Rivera, organizer for the lovely home care workers here in these coastal counties. And I'm here to deliver a couple points. First is a very good news that came from President Obama last week. He made the announcement that it's going to be affecting 2 million home care workers nationwide, where the Fair Labor Standards Act is now going to be protecting home care workers. How previously they were categorized in the wrong category as companionship services, similar to babysitters. So now in 2015, home care workers will now be eligible for minimum wage and overtime protections, and that's something that we all are really happy that our president has supported and has kept his promise. When he visited our own Pauline Beck, a member from our region in Oakland, when he walked in her shoes as a home care worker, did her work, saw her struggle, and vowed to do something to change it. As we go along and as we take home care workers out of the shadows to really show the type of work that they have been doing, making sure that they are keeping people safe, that they're making their lives happier, keeping them living longer. It is amazing work that home care workers do, and we hope to see the same level of recognition and respect be given at all levels of government. We have the support of state lawmakers and federal lawmakers, and now we come to our local officials and see the type of support that you can give to our members. Previously in the year, there were funds that were given to the county in December that alleviated some of the costs that IHSS does to the county. And we recognize as we entered a wage reopener to discuss a possibility to offer a $1 wage increase to our workers, that the county situations is not the most easiest to make that sort of possibility realistic under the certain circumstances that you are in. But one thing that we really hope that as we move forward is our health benefits. The health benefits that home care workers right now will be expiring due to the Affordable Care Act standards. There's a $28,000 service cap on the current insurance, which under new standards there's no such thing as service caps. So we're going to be going back to the negotiation table regarding our health benefits, and we hope that we can have a fair and just and speedily a negotiation process that we're going to be commencing with you all, so that we can have health insurance benefits for our home care members, considering that our health insurance will be ending at the end of this year. Something fast would be appreciated, and those negotiations begin. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Felicia Corona.
Good morning. My name is Felicitas Corona. Well, to repeat again, in the national news, the president said some good news for the future to come. For example, some of the long-term care providers will be able to receive overtime pay, in quotes, for overtime work. This program saves money. I ask our local leaders to please help us to receive our wage increase. As we begin to negotiate our health benefits, we hope for a fair and just process, and we hope you see it and retain our benefits. Thank you.
Thank you.
Irma Rodriguez. Did you say Irma Rodriguez?
I did.
We're running to speak. Good morning, members of the board. Good morning, members of the community. My name is Irma Rodriguez, and I live at 459 Hayden Street. And I take care of my son, who was born blind, neurologically brain damaged, and he also suffers from epilepsy. I quit my work as an attorney to work with my son because there was no workers that would work with him. And the problem is that because it's such a low paying position, there's not people running to sign up to work with our special needs children or the elderly the people that are served through the in-home support services. I also wanted to tell you that I'm sad, and I'm also frustrated, and I'm also angry. I'm sad because we have been fighting for this raise for a couple of years. And when we negotiated our last contract, we made a commitment not to ask for a raise, et cetera, not to give the county any problems with regards to asking for a raise, because we were promised that when the county got the money from the state, that we would reopen negotiations. To date, I don't know, I'm not on the ball with this, but it has taken years, and we're barely talking to your department heads. We've come before you for several years to tell you the facts of our situation. You know them. I don't have to repeat them. The only thing that you might not know is that not only do we provide care for the people we serve, and not all of us are family members, but we also provide food. A lot of us on the weekends get together and take food to the people that we know don't have food on Saturdays or Sundays if we don't work. We take them food, we take them water. And I feel when I go to the meetings with, and I might run over, let me know. When I go to the meetings with my coworkers, the greatest thing is the money, yes, but we find that nobody recognizes our work, that we are in the bottom, and that we're second-class citizens, and that nobody recognizes the worth of our work. Some of the members says, I work, there's no dignity in my work. The people we serve, there doesn't seem to be a compassion coming from you with regards to them. We're not only here for ourselves, we're here for them, because they don't have a voice. They cannot come and speak to you. They don't have a voice. And so we're here for them also. And I'm here to ask you that you reopen those negotiations immediately, and that we talk about it, about our raise, the dollar raise that we earned. We fought for it. We went to the state. All of us did several trips to the state to assure that that bill was passed. And you made a commitment to us that we were going to talk about it, and I want to see you with that commitment. Also, I'm here to ask that we immediately start the negotiations with regard to our health.
If we could summarize, please, because your 3 minutes is up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm asking for your support with the dollar raise. I'm also asking that we talk about our health insurance. Thank you very much. And I do thank you for listening to us. And I know that it's a difficult decision, but I think that you know to do the correct answer.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, Chair Supervisors. My name is Belen Martinez. We hope to have a fair and just negotiations with the county. As our health benefits will expire this year. We want to settle this before the end of the year. Before the end of the year, please help us out. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to address the board before I close public comment?
Mr. Chair, can I make a quick 10-second before?
Pardon me?
Could I make a quick 10-second comment, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Thank you.
While we wait for Mr. Richmond.
Thank you. Irma, I totally understand, and my heart's out for the organizations. It's a good organizations, and I know that, you know, what happened to my dad was a blessing for this program. I do appreciate the efforts. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor De La Cruz. Mr. Richmond?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Marty Richmond from Hollister. I just wanted to make some comments. Actually, two of the items I was going to mention anyway before Assembly Member Alejo picked them up. I wanted to thank him for his support of the cutbacks, getting rid of the cutbacks on the Medi-Cal for the long-term care throughout the state, not just at Hazel Hawkins. Of course, it's throughout the state because it simply was untenable the position. And I also want to thank him thank you for going for the Stop the Scam business. The holidays are coming up. The scammers are out by the droves. And this brings up the next issue, which is enforcement by the state. And this goes to something Assembly Member Alejo mentioned, which is uninsured drivers. I don't agree with his bill on the driver's license, and one of the reasons is I don't believe it's going to make any difference at all on uninsured drivers. And the reason is there's no enforcement. It's all after the fact. As somebody who was hit by an uninsured driver many years ago, what do? You report it to the Highway Patrol, you report it to the state, nothing happens, okay? And the reason is this state does not want to enforce that law, because in countries where they enforce those laws, they do it proactively. If you're not insured, they drive down to your house and they take your license plates off your car, and they put a, what do you call it, one of those Denver boots on the car, so you can't move the car, if you know what I'm talking about, a wheel lock. And you don't get that back until you get your insurance and pay for the service of somebody going down there and taking it off. So this state of California, this wonderful state that has all this money and has all these great programs, they can enforce any law they want to enforce. The scams go the same way. Why do they let these scammers call here? Millions of calls. In fact, the Federal Trade Commission says billions of calls. I wouldn't have used that number. I would have said millions. They said billions. And why is that happening? Because no one will enforce the law. And the reason they won't enforce the law, unfortunately, has to do with politics. Because they've exempted a lot of, politically, they've exempted a lot of people who then scam themselves off as saying, I'm a charity, when they're not a charity. And they just lie to you, and they just claim they're your uncle or your cousin. They're in jail in Nicaragua, or they're in jail in Europe, or they're in jail in Madagascar, or wherever it is, and they want your money. So I'll wrap up by just saying there's no reason the state can't enforce these laws if they wanted to. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. I think I saw one more speaker.
Thank you for this time, board members and members of the community. My name is Martha Booker. I work for the Behavioral Health Department, and I am also chapter president for SEIU Local 521 for this county. And I would like to bring to your attention a situation that really tugs at my heart. After 20 years of hard work and loyalty and services to this county, a retiree now finds herself with a significant illness, and she, like other retirees, is being confronted with a county proposal that can significantly increase her costs for health care, putting her in a situation where she must choose between buying medications or putting food on the table for herself and her son. I ask you to put yourselves in her situation and imagine for 1 minute what it would be like for you to be confronted with increased health care costs while barely making it on a limited income. We also have single mothers working in various departments in this county who will gravely be affected by your proposal to increase their health care costs. One is a loyal, hardworking mother who has been working for the county for many years, serving our community. And your proposal to increase her health care cost is going to cost her approximately $600 a month. Can you imagine how difficult it will be for her to support herself and her child by taking away $600 from her monthly income? So I'm asking you to please, when you're making your decisions, to consider how your decisions affect families that not only work here, but live here. And put yourselves in their place. How would you feel if you were in their position? I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else would like to discuss any items that are not on the agenda? If not, I'm going to close the public comment period and move on to department head announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we do have a few announcements. One is coming from our HR department. Today we have the Employee Health Benefits Fair. That's going to be at the Vets Hall today, and that's going to be from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. Also, item number 7, there was a typo on the agenda itself as it states October 2nd. Actually, it's October 1st as the MOU describes within the documentation.
Okay.
Just want to make sure the board was aware of that. Also, item 12, we would like to actually have that pulled as there's some items in there that needed to be corrected. So we're going to actually pull that. There was a request from our animal control office if we could move up item 16 to the first item on the regular agenda due to the fact that they need to leave as soon as possible. So.
Oh, okay. I could do that.
Okay. We also have Steve Wittry. He has a department head announcement, and he's the director of our Public Works Department.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board, and also members of the community. One of the things I wanted to bring your attention to was something that's been happening over the last month or so. We've been getting a lot of vandalism out on our county roads. What's happening is folks are, we believe it's probably 1 or 2 individuals, are taking their vehicles and destroying road signs along Cienega Road, Southside Road, Quinsabe, and some other fairly not really rural standard roads, but really close to the community. If folks can be, one, cautious when they're driving out there, because if the signs are taken out in the evening and you're driving the next day before we have a chance to get those signs back up, it could be a hazard. The signs we're talking about are speed limit signs and turn ahead signs and things of that nature. So please, as you're driving in the rural areas, take note of that. The other thing is if you can keep an eye out and let us know, or the Sheriff's Department know, if they see something that's going on, because basically that is costing the taxpayers dollars, and this road's money that is going to repair those foolish acts. So just wanted to let the board know and let the public know to be cautious when on those roads. We've had over 20 signs go down in the last 2 or 3 weeks, so just want to let you know.
Thanks. Any questions for the Public Works Director Munzer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I called Steve yesterday morning. I noticed over the weekend about 10 signs on Quinsabe Road, and they were knocked down, warning about blind turns and T intersections, and it's amazing that the people would knock down these signs and then put the rest of the public at harm's way by them being down. So I appreciate Public Works Department getting right back on them, putting them up, and I'll just go ahead and I also talked to Steve about on John Smith Road, perhaps putting up some type of share the road sign, share the road with the bicyclists. I've had a lot of calls about bicyclists being concerned about the out-of-county garbage trucks driving at higher than the speed limit or what would be as safe. And so he's going to look into that for me. So hopefully just letting the public know that we are looking at that and putting up signs to warn these out-of-county truck drivers that bicyclists use that road quite a bit. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Sometimes I wish we could put iron posts, and it just irritates the heck out of me when I see, there's some signage in my district that is knocked down almost all the time, and I'd like to see more damage to the car or the person that's doing it, but.
One of the things we are actually doing is looking at installing some game cameras that are used to hide and find illegal activities at night, trying to locate those so we can try to get some video evidence of the person going out there and doing that. So that will be looked at as well. So.
Yeah, thank you. Any other department announcements?
Yeah, there is. We also have Lisa Reinheimer. She's our director of COG, and she has an announcement as well.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Supervisors. Lisa Reinheimer, Executive Director of the San Benito Council of Governments. And this morning I have 2 fun announcements for you. The first one is, for the first time ever, San Benito County Express, our local bus service, is offering free shuttle service to the county fair, which is on October 4th, 5th, and 6th, coming up real quick. And we have schedules available for folks. They're going from 4 locations in Hollister to the county fair, and hopefully it'll be a grand success, and we'll do it next year. The other item I wanted to announce to you is that San Benito Council of Governments is encouraging folks to walk to school on International Walk to School Day. And the little incentive here is that you can register a walking school bus and enter to win a $200 gift card from Swank Farms. And what a walking school bus is a group of students walking along a well-planned route with parents to school and having stopping points along the way. So I have also flyers on the Walk to School Day as well. And in fact, a Danish study recently came out that reported that exercise before school helped children concentrate better on tasks demanding a certain level of concentration. So it has many benefits to walk to school, and so we're promoting that this year as well. That's all I had, unless you had any questions.
Any questions from the board? Supervisor De La Cruz?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Lisa, we had our regular COG meeting last week. Unfortunately, I didn't hear the information from one of my constituents until a couple days ago. And my understanding is that the city hall is thinking of building signal lights on the road when the court gets built. And I think it's almost the same model as the Salinas. And I would prefer, especially it's in my district, that some type of either some type of lights or stop signs be built for individuals to cross the courthouse, especially when you have a lot of senior citizens on the recreation department that eat their meals at lunchtime, and a lot of the community will be walking to the courthouse. So I think it will probably be more of a safety issue if we go in that direction instead of the city going on a signal light system.
So the best way I could respond to that is that a number of years ago, maybe 2 years ago, Gil Solario came to the Council of Governments asking for funding for an in-ground lighted crosswalk at Monterey and 4th Street. And the Council of Governments granted that money for $60,000 to install, for the city of Hollister to install a lighted crosswalk at that location when the courthouse was opened. Above and beyond that, really it's the city's jurisdiction as to what type of traffic control or crosswalk or pedestrian protections they would allow on their city streets. So if you want to relay that message to the city, or if you'd like me to, I'd be happy to, but that's how COG...
I will relay that message
Okay.
to the city. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you.
No, that's the rest. That's all the department head announcements that we have.
All right. Any board announcements? Supervisor Rivas, anything? Supervisor De La Cruz?
Mr. Chair.
Supervisor Barrios?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have two. First of all, I want to commend our Hollister Fire and San Benito Fire Departments. I was able to see them being led by Jeff Gernucci, leading his team, because one of my neighbors happened to get hurt, saw the fire engines, the ambulance there, and I was able to witness firsthand how effective and how quickly and caring they were. So I was very proud to see that team effort, partnership working so well. And I think if that's reflective of the work that they're doing out there daily, I think we have a lot to be proud of. So, and the other thing is to, again, just talk about the senior scam alert, how well attended it was. And I know that our assemblyman spoke about it, but it really was a very important issue because it is running rampant out there. And I believe it was very good information with some very good presenters from the State Contractors Licensing Board. So I was appreciative of having that available to our seniors, and they learned a lot from it. So thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Munzer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last week, the Monterey Bay Unified Air Pollution Control District Board met, and we allotted our fiscal year 14 AB 2766 grant awards. This is the grant that gave the county the money last year to buy the infamous electric vehicle. And this year, we granted to San Benito County $86,000. 2 projects went to the San Benito High School District, and 1 project went to our own Public Works. So I just want to report that the county received $86,000, and AB 2766 is the vehicle registration fee that is assessed on everybody's vehicle license. And that is all I have. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Last week, Supervisor De La Cruz and I had a COG meeting, and we received a report from Caltrans District 5 as far as the project on 156 that's moving forward. They're in the preliminary type of stages as far as final design work. At the meeting, there was some ideas that was discussed as far as what the county would need for the frontage or slash what I'd like to call an access road. Additional safety improvements I think this board should be looking at and strongly support at Bixby. I think their design is calling for an uncontrolled intersection that is going to make it a very dangerous area for farm workers and farm equipment to cross from the north side to the south side of the valley. That is absolutely essential. Caltrans is not making any provisions for that. And I think we need to be more proactive as far as making sure that safety comes first on our roads, because it's be our citizens that are be jeopardized by not having all the provisions in place, you know, as we're designing and putting in a new highway. And I certainly want the board, and we'll be bringing it soon. I think I've discussed this with the Public Works Director as far as what we would like to see with that frontage road or designs. And we've already passed resolutions and had support resolutions from the 2 cities in COG. But I think it needs to be reiterated so our staff is very clear as far as what we need to get into agreements to avoid the issues that we had with the Highway 25 transfer and some of the problems that led to some really design flaws that has cost this community, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, of millions. But anyway, I'll be making sure that we get that back and get a full report to the board. Also at the COG meeting, Supervisor De La Cruz made a motion. We're donating one of the older Vanpool vehicles to the American Legion so that they could utilize locally to help our local veterans get to appointments and things like that. And so the COG is a move vehicle to that nonprofit, and as we apply, is it a grant that we're get 1 vehicle or 2?
It's a $80,000 grant that we'll be able to purchase 2 more vehicles.
Right, and so that decision was made last week. That concludes my report.
Actually, Mr. Chair,
Supervisor De La Cruz.
my notes are on the bottom, and I apologize. I have 2 things to comments. Can I?
Oh yeah, sure.
Thank you. And first one is I want to thank or commend Supervisor Barrios for talking highly of the fire personnel that we have in this community, the relationship we have. In fact, that was one of my comments. Just last week in the Villahermosa section, in fact, Supervisor Bartello, our chairman, called me and informed me that there was a fire in the Villahermosa section. And sure enough, because I lived there for 43 years, I went down there and visited and was taking a walk, and I noticed that there was a house on fire that's basically really, you know, down to the ground. But I had to admire the fire department, because they had all the volunteers, had all the professionals, and even the law enforcement were there taking control of the situation, and they were able to contain the fire to 1 building structure. And I'm qualified to say this. I lived in the Villahermosa section since the day that project was built. And we have a tendency to just to store bikes, store, pictures, and it just becomes a lot of items that we continue to store. If it wasn't for the fire department and their professional ability to do that work, that fire would have spread to other houses. And they contained it within one house, and I got to commend them for that. They did a wonderful job. Thank you, Supervisor Barnes, for bringing that up. I even talked to every single person I was there and said, thank you, you actually saved more than just one house. Thank you very much. And the police department was there to conduct order, and I commend them for that. Thank you very much to the community and to the entire Hollister City Council, San Juan Bautista City Council, and San Benito County Board of Supervisors for envisioning the idea of how partnerships really do and can work for the benefit of the community. The other, Mr. Chair, is more of a kudos to the Hollister Freelance for allowing them to write a report and interview me on the prescription discount program. It has been 4 years already since we have started this program, and has saved San Benito County, those individuals that don't have health insurance today. And not every single medication will be entitled under this program. Only those that are agreed by the corporations, a discount. Instead of buying a medication that costs you $70, and if that medication is under the approved discount program, you could buy it for about $15, $20. That's a huge savings for those families that do not have health insurance. It's not a replacement for health insurance. It is not a health insurance, but it's more of a cooperation between the pharmacists and the prescription companies and members of our community. And it really benefits, at the end of the day, working families and families of our community. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We'll move on to a consent agenda. I've been asked to pull item number 11 by the public, item number 12 by the staff. The Board of Supervisors, from my understanding, does not have any other additions on pulling any other items. Any other, am I overlooking anybody from the public would like to pull anything else? If not, I'll entertain a motion for the amended consent agenda, including the correction on item 7.
Move approval.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none. Move on to a regular agenda. We'll move item 16, discussion of concerning animal control and vicious dogs and receive report.
Mr. Chair, we need to address 11 and 12 from the consent agenda.
Oh, jeez, I don't know what's wrong with me today.
Let's just continue it.
Okay,
Or
number
not
11,
continue,
please.
Pull it, yeah, so we
Oh.
don't talk about it. We need to pull it to the discussion.
Yeah, I just in too big of a hurry or not thinking clearly, I guess. Number 11, then we have
Yes, Marvin Jones.
Marvin Jones. We already have the appropriate staff member there available for you.
Not a problem. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Board. Two items. The first one is kind of picking the nit. The first entry on your data transmittal form was an acronym. It wasn't defined. What's CSWD? And the second item was a little, maybe I couldn't read things right, but there's been a recent influx of homeless in San Benito County and Hollister. Some of our locals commented that they came over from Monterey County. They got in effect, a one-way ticket from Salinas to Hollister. And so we've got a group of about 6 or 8 new ones. When I was reading this, I didn't fully comprehend what we have here. Is San Benito County going to be providing housing for folks from San Jose, housing that could be used for our own homeless? It was a little ambiguous. Maybe I didn't read it right. Thank you.
Thank you. Enrique, would you like to address that?
Sure. First, the question, the CSWD refers to Community Services and Workforce Development. That is the department that oversees this grant. The question as far as San Benito County providing housing for individuals from other communities, I don't know how. No, that's not the case. Any service that we provide for individuals relating to housing, they have to be a resident here for a certain period of time. So I'm not sure how that's interpreted. So no, that's not the case. This program here provides different services for individuals with documented HIV or AIDS. One of them being utility assistance, housing assistant. Now the full housing is just some type of support, food assistance, and some medical dental assistance. So that is limited to those 4 services as approved by the grantor.
Any questions from the board? Any further questions from the public? If not, I'll bring it back to the board for an action.
I'll make
Mr. Chair,
motion,
I
Mr.
make a
Chair.
motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none. We'll go on to item 12. Workforce Investment Act, Local Strategic Workforce 5-year plan. You probably have that one too.
Yes, Interim CEO Ray Espinosa brought to my attention on page number 3 of the plan. It's the number of miles, the distance between San Benito County and Monterey is incorrectly, along with the distance between this county and San Jose is incorrectly. So that has been revised, and you should have a copy, and I placed a couple copies in the back. And it now reflects approximately 40 miles between from San Benito County to Monterey and 50 miles from here to San Jose. That's the extent of the revision.
Okay. Any questions or comments from the board? Any questions, comments from the public? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for an action then.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, hearing none. Thank you. That concludes our consent agenda. And now we could go to the animal discussion.
All right. Thank you, Mr.
The vicious dog discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, this particular item, item number 16 on our agenda, was requested by your board to bring this to regularly agendize this particular item, and particularly to talk about vicious dogs, calls. And so we have the pleasure of having animal control here this morning to give you a presentation with regards to that within our county. So thank you again for coming down this
I
morning.
could just add one thing. There's a flyer that's going to be passed out. There's some in the back on aggressive dog behavior, and also the county ordinance on dangerous animals is also being passed out.
Good morning, Chairman and members of the board. I'm speaking today to raise awareness of the dangerous dog law that we actually do have in San Benito County. As you know, dogs that have been allowed to roam in the county have assaulted without provocation, attacked, and seriously injured other animals and people over the years. Many of these attacks have occurred in public places, generally off the property of the owners or keepers. Most dog owners and people don't see the warning signs of aggression in dogs until it's too late. Warning signs that a dog may have dangerous tendencies are overprotectiveness of possessions or people, snapping or growling while eating or being handled, attacks or previous attacks on small animals, escapes from the home and roams the neighborhood, tendencies to mount legs of humans or other animals, fear in new environments or situations, fear when meeting new people, or a tendency to chase moving objects such as bicycles, cars, or livestock. Nobody wants their dogs to suddenly attack, but unfortunately dogs do attack people and animals every day. Nationwide, man's best friend bites more than 4.7 million people each year, and approximately 16 humans die each year from dog attacks. In 2007, the city of Hollister adopted its own more restrictive, dangerous dog ordinance, and where it was very successful in reducing the number of attacks and serious injuries caused by dogs. And with that reduction in the number of attacks, the San Benito County Board of Supervisors adopted the same ordinance that the city had in 2009 to help combat the problem that we've had. And the current dangerous dog ordinance defines a dangerous dog as any of the following: any dog which, when unprovoked, inflicts injury on or kills a human being or domestic animal. Any animal which, when unprovoked, engages in aggressive conduct requiring defensive action by any person to avoid bodily injury. Any dog which, when unprovoked, chases or approaches a person in a menacing fashion or apparent attitude of attack. or any animal owned or primarily used for part of fighting. The animal control officers are trained in recognizing the many types of aggression in dogs, such as territorial aggression, animal aggression, fear aggression, stress and pain aggression, possessive aggression, and barrier aggression. And the animal control officers treat each dangerous dog case individually. No two dangerous dog cases are alike. So if a dog engages in conduct which meets the definition of the dangerous dog ordinance, the dog can be seized by an animal control officer and held at the animal care facility pending a hearing to determine if there is enough evidence to deem the dog dangerous. The costs associated with the seizure and board fees are at the dog owner's expense. So the county and the city don't bear the costs of the board fees and so forth with the holding periods. The hearing officers are utilized by both the city and the county impartially. So if we have a dangerous dog hearing in the county, the city will hear it, and vice versa. If a dog is deemed to have been in violation, the hearing officer can impose restrictions on the keeping of the dog, such as kenneling, or, worst case scenario, the dog can be ordered to be destroyed. Since the dangerous dog was adopted, Hollister Animal Care and Services investigated hundreds and hundreds of dangerous dog incidents. Not all incidents automatically warrant a seizure or hearing. Most dog owners either surrendered their dog or made changes so their dog cannot escape anymore. Currently, the Hollister Police Animal Care and Services has 10 dogs under a dangerous dog designation only in the unincorporated of San Benito County. In 2012, Animal Control investigated 66 dog bites, and that involved all different types of dogs, not just pit bulls. German Shepherds, Chihuahuas, Labradors, and pit bulls were the main four. In 2013, the number went down, and that is due to the city of Hollister enacting the mandatory spay-neuter ordinance for pit bulls and Chihuahuas and mixes of those two breeds. So in 2013, we investigated 52. So the numbers are going down as far as dog bites go. So,
Julie, if I could interrupt you right
Sure.
there, because that's when I asked to bring this to the board's attention, I wanted some numbers, and you're getting into the number part of it right now. How many of those, of the 55 and in 2012, 66, I think you mentioned, was that in the county?
I can get those to you. Unfortunately, our chameleon system is not breaking down the bites per county and the bites per city. This is just total, and a lot of that is because the state of California wants to know the total for the county and the city. And so HLP has, we just haven't broken those down yet. So that's combined between the two. But I do know, just being at the shelter and seeing every dog bite that comes in, it's probably about half and half.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Half city, half county when the dog bites come in. But of those bites, those do not include dog attacks on other animals. And a lot of our dangerous dog hearings and orders are based on dogs that attacked other animals or livestock. So the dog and dog attacks and the dog and livestock attacks are not included in those. Those are just human bites that are included in those stats that I just gave you. So.
Okay, I have some other questions after you're done with your presentation. So
Sure.
I'll let you continue.
Yeah, I'm almost done. I just wanted to, make sure that people recognize warning signs, that they make sure that they keep their dogs contained to their property. For instance, there was we have a dog being held at animal control right now. It's a young dog. The owners did not keep their dog contained to their property. It was in Tres Pinos. And so the dog started to roam. The dog was of a herding type breed. And so the dog started chasing bicyclists, and after about a month of doing that, he finally bit his first victim. And so now that person was bit while riding their bicycle, and the dog is held at animal control right now. So, you know, most bites occur because the dog owners failed to keep their dogs contained to their property. And, you know, there's a lot of myth that people move to the county so that their dogs can have a place to run, and dogs don't need places to run. They need to be managed, and they need to be walked with a leash and be contained and controlled. So if more people can make sure that their fences are in good repair, that their dogs are vaccinated, and that they're licensed, and that they know how to take their dog for obedience training, then that will reduce the number of dog bites and the dog attacks on dogs and livestock. So I just want to encourage people to report anything. If, you know, if a dog comes up to you and acts, you know, in an aggressive manner or bites you, please report it to the animal control or your local law enforcement, so that we can take action before something more serious doesn't happen.
Is there any questions from the board?
Mr. Chair, I had a call, not my constituents, actually, I think it was Supervisor Munzer's constituent, in which somehow, and it's more of a individual case, so we kind of want to talk here global, but I guess I'll just, and in fact, I just text a person that says that, okay, if I talk about your case in public, and he gave me permission. And I don't want to take the board's too much time, but I think this might follow a pattern and this, you know, put a stop to it. Well, it might go, you know, grow. I guess someone called in that his dog was out on the streets, and the animal control went to their house and said, oh, by the way, your dog's out there, and I put it in the back of your yard. And the gentleman raised a lot of questions. Go, well, one, how do you know it's my dog? Two, what gave you permission to go to my yard, my backyard? And three, how do you know that the dog was out there? It's just an array of slippery slopes actions that I even raised when we were approving this thing, Mr. Chair. So I want to make sure that didn't happen, what the gentleman said. And he just texted me saying that actually you guys have court hearing tomorrow on that case. So.
Well, generally speaking, if we're out on patrol and we see a dog running loose, say on 4th Street, we get out, we try to catch the dog, and the dog takes off running. So generally what we do is we get after the dog, we make a lot of noise, and we basically follow that dog at a run, and that dog will go right to his house.
Okay.
And generally, most people's gates are open, and that's from what the dog escaped from. The dog will run, I mean beeline it, right to that backyard. Or they'll V-line it right to the front door, turn around, and they'll start barking at us. And so then we know that that dog lives there. Very seldom do we ever have stray dogs that just run into a random backyard. If they do, it's because there was an open backyard and we'd been following that dog for blocks and blocks and blocks. So the animal control officers know dog behavior. We know when dogs don't live at a certain residence. And that was and generally it's a courtesy if the back gate's open and the animal control officer runs your dog into the backyard and closes the gate, and then we post a notice. So that was a courtesy to that person, you know, or they'll receive a citation rather than the dog having to be picked up and seized and brought to the animal control facility itself.
Okay, good. Good, thank you.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Well, what I want to ask you, Julie, is do we have enough teeth here? Because there's other communities that have pretty stringent vicious dog ordinances. And you know, when we first were discussing our contract, and I mentioned that, you know, I was attacked and I shot these dogs, and I had more phone calls over that stupid article in the paper than anything else. And, you know, and you came out, and I assume you took care of the issue. And if you didn't do that, and I saw the dogs again, I probably would have shot them and killed them next time.
Right, right.
But a few weeks later, one of the you know, a friend of mine who is a field worker moving pipe at the end of the street was attacked by another pit bull by some other neighbor. And I'm sure you took care of that issue as well.
We did.
Do we have enough consequences in the county ordinance to really, I want to have deterrence, you know, not just come in, pay a little fine and get, you know, Spotty out of the animal control kennel. But I think there needs to be some real deterrence to have vicious dogs that attack people or other animals. Do we have that in place?
Well, when the board modeled the city in 2009, that ordinance is very restrictive. It defines, I mean, the old ordinance that we were using actually was a state law. It was under the Food and Agriculture Code, and that law required that a dog had to bite somebody 2 times. So that was a really bad thing. So that's why we went with this more restrictive law with the city. That way people didn't have to be bitten twice before action could be taken. So this ordinance is very restrictive in the fact that a dog does not have to actually physically bite you and cause injury. If that dog threatens you and comes up and charges at you and growls at you and scares you, or you fall, or you just become very, very threatened of that dog, we can seize that dog at that point. So this is one of the more restrictive, dangerous dog laws that are out there. And it's worked out very, very well. But I think the main thing is that people need to start contacting animal control when dogs are roaming the neighborhoods continuously, because that's what happens is dogs allowed to continuously roam, their perimeter gets larger and larger and larger. So a dog that starts out with one house could end up in a few months protecting the whole block. And so that's generally what happens is dogs get braver and braver and braver. Or if another dog comes in behind him like a little chihuahua and says, yeah, go bite him, So that's why I think it's important for people to contact us and when dogs are running at large, so that way we can issue citations. Thank you for passing the administrative citation process. It's really helped a lot in that we can, not have to do so much paperwork and going to court and try to get some action. And then the other thing to answer your question is, in regard to pit bulls, is maybe if the board would want to model the mandatory spay-neuter for pit bulls and chihuahuas to the county, would help eliminate the number of unaltered pit bulls that are running at large and the number of pit bulls that are being bred in the county. Because I do know for a fact that our spay-neuter ordinance in the city has worked, and we have there's probably 3/4 of the licensed pit bulls that we did have were all spayed and neutered. So that's going to reduce our pit bull population and our chihuahua population. And I think if the county the county modeled the city, that would reduce the number of pit bulls that are allowed to roam in the county and reproduce in the county as well. Therefore, that'll reduce your number of pit bulls that are running loose. So it's really worked in the city. We don't have near amount of pit bulls and chihuahuas in the shelter that we did, 2 years ago. And we had a lot of, positive feedback from the public when the city, after the city did adopt that ordinance, that they were glad that it forced them to spay and neuter their dogs and they didn't have to worry about puppies anymore. So it might be something the board would want to think about to help combat that twofold problem, with the pit bulls and the overpopulation problem.
Okay, great, and because it is a problem.
It is.
At this time, I'll open it up for public comment if there's any. Seeing none, thank you for the report.
Actually,
And-
Mr. Chair?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I got 2 real easy questions. The first one, is there a ban or law of dogs barking up to 2 o'clock in the morning? Do we call the police department for that, or? I
Yeah.
get that and I'm tired of it.
Well, the city's barking dog ordinance is a little bit different than the county's. In the cities, it requires 2 people to make a complaint.
Oh, that's a problem, my wife and I.
Well, 2 separate households to complain, or if the dog barks for 20 minutes, or if an animal control officer is actually witnessing it, but that usually doesn't happen because it's usually in the middle of the night. Now, the county ordinance is a little bit different, and it's a habitual barking in nature. So, yes, we can write citations for dogs that bark, but they generally require a log so that we can see that there's a pattern of habitual barking in nature.
How about those, when you're walking in certain neighborhoods and the dogs are so vicious you can just hear them, they're just shaking the fence, and you know that fence is real weak. There's
Then-
nothing we can do on that, right?
Absolutely, you can contact us, and we can contact the dog owners and make them repair their fences.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. If there's no further questions from the board, we'll probably hear from back at, maybe we'll consider that ordinance that the city has for spade and neutering chihuahuas and pit bulls, and we'll see on that. And also maybe before our next budget, I'd like to get a complete summary of the calls that you make in the unincorporated areas, a complete summary, you know, whether it's barking dogs or too many animals, just help us during the budget times. You know, we're looking at all of our volumes with our contracts and making sure, you know, we have an understanding of the level of services that are being provided by all our contractors. So.
Well, we have the calls broke down already between city and county as far as barking, you know, seizure dog, that kind of stuff. Animals picked up, that's all broken down. If you would like that, we can get that to you within the next week. But as far as the bites go, those aren't broken down, but I can definitely talk with our HLP, and we can get a program to differentiate the bites between humans and other animals and livestock, and then so that way you'll know the difference between the city and the county. That's
Okay.
not a problem.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll move on to, we're a handle 14 and 15 together.
Yeah.
CEO Espinoza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, your board had requested to bring the general plan to every single board meeting until we get the general plan updated. So today we have Byron here. He's the interim director of our planning department to give you a general plan update, as well as discuss item 15 about the appointing a general plan ad hoc subcommittee to monitor the progress of the general plan. So thank you, Byron.
Yeah, and before you start, Byron, as I've mentioned at the last meeting, and I think going forward, we have to make the general plan a priority for this county and to get it completed and get it done and over with. I had a meeting that I attended for the Business Council, and they kind of jumped on us a little bit because we haven't got this revision completed. We have a lot of money invested in it, and I think now if we do make that effort, we're going to be successful and get it through. And so during my last couple of months as chair, it might be a little pain for Byron, but I intend to have this on our agenda every single meeting until we get it done. And so with that, I'll allow Mr. Turner to start his presentation.
Well, I just wanted to, as requested, I'm here to provide an update on the progress of what has been going on with the general plan update. The RFP is out. We've requested a response by the end of the month. I haven't received anything yet, but hope to get something this week. We also discussed the general plan at length at the Planning Commission last Wednesday and reported on the recent actions of the board. The results of that discussion is that the Planning Commission is interested in having a joint meeting with this board after a consultant is hired. They didn't see the point of doing it until then, but that way everyone can get together. The Planning Commission also requested that it have a standing item on its agenda similar to this one, so I'll be doing this for the Planning Commission from here on out as well. After a consultant is hired, the Planning Commission did express interest in forming an ad hoc committee to discuss the general plan and would like to focus, that committee would like to focus on the process and the milestones as opposed to the substance of the plan. They want to make sure that there is a clear path from here on out, that everyone is on the same page as to what the process is and setting milestones so that we can meet those milestones. That concludes the report. Next Tuesday, I'll let you know what kind of responses we get from the RFP.
have a question for Byron.
Supervisor
Mr. Chair,
Barrios.
thank you. The Planning Commission is supporting the ad hoc committee, but are they also wanting to have their own Planning Commission ad hoc committee?
They were talking about their own, not independent of the board. However, they'd be willing to work with the board as well.
Okay. All right, but now if you have, let's say you have 2 board members and 2 planning commissioners, can they meet, the 4 of them together without having to post any kind of agenda, or does that work? And so the
So
council
2
body-
ad hoc committees from 2 separate bodies can meet without violating the Brown Act.
Okay.
But if they meet regularly and under a schedule, then it kind of gets transformed into a standing committee. So spontaneous or irregular meetings or few meetings between the groups, I don't think it poses a problem. But if the ad hoc subcommittee from the board and the ad hoc subcommittee from the Planning Commission are going to meet every Friday at noon, then you've probably become a standing committee.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Byron. So with that being said, then my recommendation would be, Mr. Chair, that when we meet as a jointly with the Planning Commission, that at that time, by that time, we will have a consultant, because that's when they would like for us to come together, is that we, or you, who appoints the ad hoc committee, and they can do that at that same. This way, we both know who sits on it, and we can plan and move forward with some meetings.
Right. As we discussed, we had a meeting, just kind of an impromptu meeting, Supervisor Barrios and myself and Director Turner, just to try to understand where each of us are kind of coming from with the special community study areas and have a better understanding what's going on there. We talked about, how do we go forward from where we're at. And I think, as Mr. Turner mentioned, we got to get the consultant on board, allow him the appropriate amount of time to see where we're at with the general plan revision, what's left to be done, and the timelines and milestones that should be established to get that accomplished. Once we have that and an understanding by the consultant where we're at, we should have a joint planning commission meeting along with the Board of Supervisors, so we could receive a report from the consultant. And from there, review the roles of the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission within this process. And probably from that point, we should decide jointly, how we're going to address. We don't want too many committees stepping on each other's toes either. We just want, I think, collectively move forward in an efficient manner to get this project completed in the least amount of time and least amount of expense we can. And so that's kind of what I hope the board could support as a plan to go forward. Supervisor Rivas?
Yeah, my concern about a joint meeting, I don't think a joint meeting is necessary, because the last I looked, this is a 5-member Board of Supervisors, not a 10-member Board of Supervisors. I don't think a joint, we had a joint meeting a couple years ago. It was more of like a workshop type of scoping meeting when we had the discussion about the general plan, about kind of the visioning process. But I think when we come to the point of making a decision about what to adopt, I think the process, in order to save the integrity of the document, I think that we need, the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission play 2 very different roles. I think the Planning Commission is advisory, and I think they should stay advisory. I think we are the policymaking and adoption body of the general plan. And I think that I have no problem taking recommendations from the Planning Commission, but I have a problem when we are seeking to extend this board by 5 members in adopting and creating a general plan. I think the process is good the way it is. I don't think a joint, I actually think the joint meeting is a bad idea. So that's where I'm at. And as far as ad hoc, the committees, this thing is blown up several times over, and we all point the fingers in different ways because of ad hoc, those committees. I think that we need to let staff do their job, do their work, and especially when it comes to these study areas, we've given direction 3 times or 2 times on why we want these specific study areas, and we've given direction for staff to work on these narratives. I think that when they come back to the board, if there are problems with them, that's the time to talk about an ad hoc committee. If we have problems with these narratives, if we have problems with specific things, then that might be the perfect time to say, hey, you know what, we have issues with them as a board. Let's create an ad hoc committee so we have our board working directly with staff and fixing the problems we see in these narratives or these problems. But I think we just need to let this process run its course. The more time, the more people we get involved in this process, it's going to cost money, it's going to cost time. I want to see this done. I'd like to see it done under your chairmanship. But at the same time, I don't think that's going to be realistic, especially if we're creating these joint meetings. I'd like to just move on. I'd like to set direction today and move on. I think it's important to have periodic updates to our board. I think that if the Planning Commission wants to do their own thing, because they're an advisory committee, that's absolutely fine. That's within their decision-making authority. But I would really like to move on after this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And, I appreciate your comments, Supervisor Rivas, and I think what you're misinterpreting what I hope to accomplish by the joint meeting. The joint meeting is to get a report so we hear it and the Planning Commission hears the same information where we're at with the general plan. I have no clue where we're at with the general plan as far as what's take to get it accomplished, and that's kind of part of it. The other part is that there's been a disconnect between the Board of Supervisors, the GPAC committee, the staff, the former consultant, as far as what the role is of the Planning Commission in this whole process, and they've been pretty much been aced out. And in order for us to move forward, I think they need to work on the nuts and bolts specific issues that some folks have brought up. I believe they have to review and have input in the narratives for the specific project areas. They should have they have to have, review the zoning issues that, needs to be done. There's quite a bit of specifics that the Planning Commission needs to have before them. As far as the ad hoc committee, I had envisioned that it would work on the narratives specifically. Each specific project area or planned community area is unique upon itself and deserves a separate narrative, but then you could have also one that is more of a global message within our general plan. But, maybe I was mistaken in that the Board of Supervisors ad hoc committee shouldn't be doing that work. It should be with the staff, consultant, and Planning Commission and our final review of it. But the ad hoc committee is to make sure that the consultant is doing their work. I wish we had one from 2010, 2011 that worked consistently with the previous consultant to make sure he was, accomplishing what we were paying him to do. Instead, it didn't happen. We have 2 planners down at the planning department with a workload that is appears to be growing. And sometimes it helps to have a couple of supervisors that kind of push a priority along, and we've seen that happen with other projects this year. And that's what the ad hoc committee would be set up to do. And we need to continue to, hopefully review these study areas if that's truly what needs to happen, and that should be done at the Planning Commission level.
Mr. Chair.
So that's the idea that I hope we could move forward with. But if we take a hands-off position like we've been, Supervisor Rivas, this thing's never get done. It didn't get done last time.
Mr. Chair, I'm not saying take a hands-off approach. I'm saying let the process run its course like every other county does. Let staff do their work. I'm not here to hold staff's hand. I'm here to hold them accountable. I think that we have to allow them the opportunity to get this work done, and then in the end, we review all the work that they're going to do. But this is like a dog and pony show that I don't want any part of anymore. I mean, we've got to let staff do their job. That's the only point I'm making. I don't want to take a hands-off approach at all. I want to do my job as a supervisor, and I want to entrust staff to do their job. And then in the end, we're going to review a document, and we're going to approve, and we'll make those corrections down the line. That's the only point I wanted to make. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr.
Supervisor De La Cruz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My point is exactly the same as Supervisor Rivas. You put this ad hoc committee must well put a placeholder on the agenda for now to the end of the year when you're chairman, and I hope that the new chairman coming in doesn't put a placeholder, because I get tired of listening to these things. We have given direction to our staff to come back with a summary of these areas, and then the board of supervisors will look at them. And then to further the situation and to complicate the situation by increased costs, more time, you want to set up a task force between the planning commissioners and the board of supervisors. When I read the document the last time of who's who, we are the elected individuals of this community, and the planning commission were appointed by us to serve as an advisory capacity to the board of supervisors. Where am I missing the point here?
You're missing the point is that we have spent $1.5 million, and we're no closer to a general plan than what we were in 2010. The minute that, with all respect, you changed the ad hoc committee back when you took the chairmanship, Supervisor De La Cruz, things kind of went south. And nothing got done since that point in time, except that the consultant went to cash his check. And if we expect the same, a different outcome doing the same thing, we're not going to get this project completed. I want us to take a more proactive approach. I want our planning commission to take a more proactive approach and define our roles. If you talk to your planning commissioner, and I encourage all 5 of us to talk to our planning commissioner, they have no clue what's going on with this project. And that is why I think it's absolutely essential to have a summary and an overview of the general plan jointly. And that's not saying that they're part of the final decision process. They're not. They're advisory, and they know it, but they have, there's work that could be accomplished by them, but that we're getting the same information as they are. This has never happened in the whole process, and here we are at the end of 2013 for a project should have been done in the summer of 2012. I don't know what else to do. You guys want to just shove it, to the back burner and, tell the public that we spent $1.5 million on this project and we're not getting anywhere with it. And there's projects and business people, property owners, and it's not just developers. It's business people that want this thing done. And this is the best approach I could think of, unless you guys come up with a better approach. Supervisor Munzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to come out on record right now, and I hope, and whether I'm misunderstanding these ad hoc committees, but I want to come out on record that I do not want to see 2 ad hoc committees
I don't either.
out there, one of the Board of Supervisors and one of the Planning Commission. If it's a joint ad hoc committee, that's fine. I think I'm tending to lean towards turning this general plan over to the Planning Commission, let them do the heavy lifting for us. My understanding is this meeting they've had this month was like the first meeting they've had in 3 months, I believe, Byron? Didn't they go 2 months?
Oh, yeah, we had a couple of meetings with empty agendas, yeah.
Okay, so they have the time to work on this. It's taken us 2 hours just to get to this point in our agenda, and this is basically the first thing on our regular agenda. I don't know that we have the time to devote to doing the heavy lifting to get this general plan. Let's turn it over. Let's have our joint meeting. Let's get everything talked out, give them direction of where we want them to go, let them do the heavy lifting, let them work with the consultant, because I don't think they have ever worked with the consultant in this whole process, our previous consultant, and then have Byron coming to us after every one of their meetings and giving us an update on what they are talking about, what they're deciding on doing, and then we can give okay, we like that, or no, we want to tweak this way or that way. But I really think they have the time to do the heavy lifting for us. Let's let them do it, and let's get this done.
That's all I'm suggesting, right there in a nutshell. And it's very simple. Supervisor Barrios?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, I think the joint meeting can be very effective if we do it properly and we do it right. The first thing that I think a joint meeting will do is going to reflect the seriousness of where we are in this general plan, not just to the public, but to the Planning Commission. Like you said, we've had a disconnect, not because they haven't been doing their work, they just haven't gotten the work to do. So now, once we make that public and we come together to express that, I think it'll send that message out there loud and clear. I think it'll give that same urgency that we have to the Planning Commission and to the consultant, because by that time, we will have hired a consultant. And the message that we can do this together. The third thing is that we can express how important the Planning Commission is to this process. I think that we have kind of let them down as supervisors by not letting them have the opportunity to play a part. We did a lot of things ahead of the Planning Commission. And in the discussion process, it should have been coming from them to us instead of us to them. So this way, we'll set the record straight that we want the Planning Commission to play that important role that we have given them by appointing them to that position. So I think talking about the process and the milestones will be very important at that meeting, and then let them run with it. And the reporting, I have to agree with Supervisor Munzer that the reporting process is what we are going to have to play a very big part on. Whether we have an ad hoc committee or not, we will expect it, and if it's not happening, then I think we need to go with your direction in appointing somebody to stay on top of it. But I expect that our staff knows where we're going and that they will follow our direction. So, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Rivas?
Yeah, I want to make it clear. As I said in my initial comments, we have to stay the course. There's a process. What Supervisor Munzer said is the process. Let the Planning Commission do their job. Let the Planning Commission do their work. They're advisory. The general plan is going to go to is going to go through staff to the Planning Commission for their review, and then the document comes to the Board of Supervisors. It's exactly what Munzer said. It's exactly what I was advocating for. Where you didn't understand and you're scolding, looking my way, leering my way, and scolding me is very inappropriate. And I want you to understand, maybe you don't understand the process, but I did from the very beginning. And that's exactly what I was advocating for. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well, the process is going to have a joint meeting of the Board of Supervisors and the Planning Commission. We're going to discuss and get the information from the consultant where we're at, what milestones we expect in this process. That's what's going to happen. Whether we form a, excuse me, if we form an ad hoc committee or not, that's be determined at the time if one's needed. And that's what we're to do. Okay, I'll open it up to public.
Marvin Jones?
After Byron's report, I have no comment.
Okay. Anyone else?
I don't have any other speakers.
Okay.
Marty.
Just confirm an earlier quote Marty Richard from Hollister. I want to confirm an earlier quote. You said you would shoot those dogs again. Before I write it in the paper, you said you would shoot those dogs again if they showed up. Is that what you said?
Shoot.
Yeah, didn't you say you'd shoot the dogs again?
If they're on my property, I'm not going to let
Yeah.
them bite me not once.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would.
It had nothing to do with the
has
general
nothing to
plan.
do
You're
with the
not going to
general
shoot
plan.
anybody over the general plan. I just
Has
want to make sure.
nothing to do with the
Good.
general plan.
Okay. Here's my sage advice, and I expect it to be fully ignored as usual. First of all, I hope no one on the Board of Supervisors is going to try and use the Planning Commission to put a stop to portions they oppose of the decisions the board has made as a whole about what's supposed to be in the general plan. Okay? Because I think that's one of the problems we have is people who were outvoted, and that includes everybody, not in case you all think I'm talking about one person, have to give it up when the vote's over. You can't just keep fighting it or we're never getting done with this. You have to get behind what the board has voted for as a majority and push. Okay? Because if you don't do that, all you encourage is everybody in the entire county to get up here and complain about everything. So if the board votes 3-2 or 4-1 or 5-0, whatever it is, no matter what side you're on that issue, when that issue is voted, that's the end of it. You've got to get behind it and push the board's solution, not individual solutions, or we're never getting done. And the second problem is, as somebody who I can brag a little bit, holds a program manager's certificate from the American Management Association. You don't need me because I wouldn't get near it with a 10-foot pole, but you need a program manager on this desperately. Might be one of the people you already have employed, might be somebody else. But there's no committee that can manage this kind of an item. You need somebody who's willing to bulldog this every single day. Somebody who's willing to have the milestone chart in front of them, to know who's supposed to be doing what, and that's always an individual. He may have a staff, she may have a staff, yes, but you can't be a committee, because otherwise you have a meeting, you say, oh, I thought you were going to call him. No, I thought you were going to call him. This kind of a program only gets done if you have someone who's in charge. And that someone can't reasonably be a consultant. It has to be somebody in your employ. Somebody new, somebody old. So I suggest you put somebody in the back room, lock the door, and ask honestly your planning director, do we have the people? And do we have the expertise? And do we have the thing to do it, put a program manager, and I'll wrap up, on this job? And if the answer is no, you better get one. And if the answer is yes, you better appoint them and hold them responsible. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, if not, I'll bring it back to the board. Any other comments?
Mr. Chair, I have a question for Byron. Byron, you said you have not received any RFP responses to this point. Are you expecting to receive some?
I spoke to someone yesterday who was working on giving me a scope. Otherwise, I've had several thanks but no thanks letters. I've declined to take the job.
Okay, because I want to bring up something probably just as distasteful as what we've already discussed, and that is, I think we're going to have to consider going back to our original consultant if we can't get some decent response. And I bring that up because I know it is distasteful. I've kind of heard in the community that many of the consultants don't want to touch this with a 10-foot pole. So I think we need to start mulling that over, whether we'd be willing to go back to the original consultant. And I'm not asking for any kind of answer now, but just I think we need to have that as it may end up being that possibility. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Maybe, because I'm going to have this item on the agenda next meeting, if need be, that needs to be a discussion, we could discuss it at the next meeting. Preferably, we don't have to.
I think we would all hope that would be the case.
Okay. Any other comments? Okay, so that's the plan going forward. We'll move on to the next item, the update on the San Use Reservoir, CEO Espinosa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, Janet, can you do me a favor? Can you turn on the projector, please? That way, on the agenda packet on page 383, there's a San Felipe pipeline system that's actually diagrammed out within our county that gives an overview benchmark of the conduit system. It's in black and white, a little hard for you to see and really be able to get a better understanding of the pipeline. So what I wanted to do is share with, yeah, it's on the computer. Could somebody?
Mr. Chair, before we move forward on this item, we need to give our clerk of the board some clarification, because I don't think it was absolutely clear that we took 14 and 15 together.
Oh.
And so, of course, you know, she may be waiting for us to address 15, even though we've already discussed it. So we just want to make sure she knows that we took them together.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. When I announced it, I thought I had mentioned that.
So you did say together, but then there was no, I didn't get any
direction
direction for 15.
for the record.
Oh, okay, for the record, yeah, we were, do we need a motion for that?
No, I think just
No?
direction. Is that correct?
Yeah, that we were going to discuss,
Ad hoc committee, so I need to know what the direction is.
right, there's no
Council.
action on the
Yeah,
ad
so I
hoc?
was going to say, so if I understand the board's decision, as of today, there's been no action taken to appoint an ad hoc committee for the general plan. There may be in the future, but at the result of today's meeting, no action was taken.
Right, okay, thank you for the help.
Excuse me, Supervisor.
Okay, so thank you, Dale, for coming down. Appreciate this. This has been an item that we've been addressing for a few years, and we have San Bernardino County Water District here to help us out to kind of see where we've been, give us a timeline, and about some possible solutions that we may have for the San Justo Reservoir. So I invited Dale here. Appreciate you coming out and giving a presentation, so thank you very much.
No problem. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, honored
Good morning.
supervisors. My name is Dale Roskamp. I'm an engineer with San Benito County Water District. I'm here to give you an update on the zebra mussel infestation at San Justo Reservoir and the efforts to date to perform an eradication and to answer any questions you might have today. To give you a little background before I begin, the Central Valley Project, which is administrated by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, built a series of aqueducts and pump stations and pipelines to bring water from the Sacramento Delta area throughout California. The Delta Mendota Canal brings the water to San Luis Reservoir. A pump station was built called the Pacheco Pump Station. It brings the water in one pipeline where it splits. Luckily, approximately 25% of the water comes to San Benito County. The other 75% goes by pipeline to Santa Clara County. That water goes in what's called the Hollister Conduit, which is a 54-inch diameter pipeline that runs down the eastern side of the valley, then crosses over, follows Union Road roughly, and then terminates in San Justo Reservoir. The next part of the background is regarding the zebra mussels. The zebra mussels are what are called a Dreisnid mussel. They're originally from the Baltic. When the Cold War ended and shipping from the Baltic states and the old Soviet Republic was allowed to occur, they brought these mussels into the St. Lawrence Seaway and the Great Lakes. They would dump their bilge tanks and they've just spread from there like wildfire. There's also another type of mussel from the same region, which is a cousin of the zebra mussels. They're called the quagga mussels, and they're just as big a problem. Zebra mussels were observed in San Justo Reservoir approximately January of 2008. In March of 2009, it was confirmed that they were in the Hollister Conduit pipeline. Since 2008, the San Justo Reservoir was closed to the public and quarantined. This was in an attempt to stop the spread of the zebra mussels because one of the vectors that it was thought that brought the mussels to San Justo was possibly a fisherman who had maybe gone to Oklahoma or Nebraska and never cleaned out their bait box or their, their gear and then inadvertently it had gotten into the water and spread. So with that, back in 2008, it was jointly decided by the USBR, California Department of Fish and Wildlife, which back then was called the Department of Fish and Game, my water agency, and the county to have the reservoir quarantined to the public. San Benito County Water District and USBR also decided to work towards a total eradication of this infestation in the pipeline and the reservoir so that we could eventually reopen the reservoir to the public for recreational use. To that end, a blue panel commission was sort of, basically an ad hoc commission was put together where we brought in experts on the zebra mussel issue. We explored all the possible options for eradicating them, including emptying out the reservoir and the pipeline to dry them out, using chlorine, using copper sulfate, using something called bio-bullets, which is a derivation of potassium chloride, otherwise known as potash, and then a strain of inert Pseudomonas bacteria, which is toxic to the mussels. This was all gone over, and it was decided to go with potash or potassium chloride as the material that would be used to eradicate the mussels. The reason why potash was chosen, or is chosen, is that it's very species specific. It only, and how it kills the mussels is it paralyzes their respiratory system so they can't breathe. So we looked at this. Another reason we chose this was the only successful eradication of mussels in North America has been using potash at the Millbrook Quarry in Virginia. It's the only successful eradication that's been attempted. There was Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska where they tried to use copper sulfate, and they thought they'd gotten them, but after 3 years they noticed they'd come back. So what we did is we worked with the USBR. The USBR owns the Hollister Conduit and San Justo Reservoir. The Water District is what is called a contractor. We have a contract with USBR to operate the pipeline and the reservoir facility. So we don't actually own the reservoir, but we're devoted, to eradicating these things. So we have pulled money out of our capital reserve, a little less than about $300,000, to actually move forward with the environmental process to sort of kickstart things, try to get things going as much as we can. So the first step, let me backstep a little bit. We were going to dose the reservoir with 100 parts per million of potassium ion. That is twice the amount necessary to kill the mussels. We wanted to be sure. But it is not even 1/10 of what it would take to start giving toxicity to the most sensitive species, which is the amphibians, the red-legged frogs and such. So this is very specific. We liked this because it's cost-effective, species-specific, and yet at the same time, it won't impact humans at the dosage it's at, and it won't impact our customers, which is the ag community. And there's one water treatment plant that runs off of that. So it's not even 2% of your dietary, the dosage we are proposing wouldn't even be 2% of your dietary requirement for potassium. Moving forward, the first step to performing the eradication is completing the environmental review. And there are 3 levels to the environmental review. There's what's the CEQA review with California Environmental Quality Act. There's the NEPA review because it's a federally owned facility, the National Environmental Policy Act. And then you have to get, because potassium chloride has never been used in California as a molluscicide, you have to get a permit from the state and federal government under what's called Section 18 of the Federal Insecticide, Fungicide, and Rodenticide Act. We just call it FIFRA for short. But you have to get a permit from the state and feds to be able to use the potash as a molluscicide. So to date, we've been coordinating with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. We came up with a common project description so that we were on the same page. We had the same project moving forward with separate environmental documents. San Benito County Water District did the CEQA environmental review, and we filed a CEQA document with the county recorder in June of 2012 after having the public review. We drafted a 95% FIFRA application, had the state and the federal agencies review it in kind, and then we put that on the shelf for now. We don't actually want to get the permit because this is what's called an emergency permit. The lifespan of an emergency permit, once you receive it, is about 3.5 years. There are no extensions. You can't apply again. The mentality is if you can't do it in 3.5 years, then it really isn't an emergency. And you have to go through a much more prolonged process to get it permanently rated as a fungicide, the potash. And then for NEPA, the USBR has drafted an environmental assessment under NEPA, but it has not gone out for public review. They're not funding it and putting staff time on it at present. It's not considered a priority in their mind's eye. There's other things that are a greater priority. So there we are. We can't even get past the first stage. The other stages that would follow if we could actually complete the environmental process would be for the Bureau to put together plans, specs, and bid documents to try to get Congress to allocate money, and our initial estimate right now, the most recent estimate, is $2.5 million to perform an eradication. That would be $1.25 million for the potash material itself and $1.25 to actually get the equipment and the materials and the personnel out there to do the work. The next step would be for the execution of the eradication and with post-eradication monitoring, which would probably take 2 to 4 years, all depending on whether you get the Cal Department of Fish and Game, or Fish and Wildlife now, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, and the Bureau's biologists to all agree. So that is where we are with that. And if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them right now.
Any questions from the board?
I have a question. There's no way we can, I mean, in your opinion, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Typically, I take a walk in my district, every other Saturday, and one of the comments that actually came up was this Saturday. Funny, said they want to know if they can go fishing there. Park their car there, take your fishing gear, and they can't, right?
No.
It will contaminate the gear.
It's quarantined. It's closed till further notice.
Okay, I know it's closed to further notice to ensure that any contamination doesn't go outside. I understand that. And that just totally related to boat, is totally related to anything.
Anything.
Even a fishing gear equipment.
Even fishing gear particularly, because many people don't clean their fishing gear and then they take them right on to the next body of water.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Supervisor Munzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I talked to Ray about this because I get a lot of calls because the reservoirs in my district, a lot of calls about the same thing as Supervisor De La Cruz mentioned, that people want to know why they can't go up there and fish. I talked to Don Kelly yesterday of the Parks and Rec Commission, and my proposal is we have the Park and Rec Commission, again, do the heavy lifting for us, see if there's any way of having a closed, contained system in which we come up with a contractor, much like we had before, that will manage it for us, purchase rowboats, purchase fishing tackle, whatever needs to be purchased, rent it out, and so nothing leaves the park, and that we're able to reopen it for fishing under a contract basis, and everything stays there locally. Also, if the process is being held up by the feds, I would ask, do we need to contact Congressman Farr with a proclamation or a resolution and see what he can do for us to get this process going forward and getting the eradication process moving forward again and getting it done. And so we'd love to work with you on that, and if you need something from us, phone calls to his office, proclamation, whatever, I would propose that we do
Every
that.
little bit helps.
Yeah.
To keep it, get it and keep it on radar.
Right, because we need to get this done.
The
It's just
problem, the problem that is going on is the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation and the Cal Department of Fish and Wildlife will not budge on removing the quarantine in any fashion. It is closed in their mind until the eradication occurs.
Well, I appreciate what you said, but I still would like to explore other possibilities. Just like Clear Creek, the feds with the stroke of a pen clear Creek as an emergency thing, and that's been what?
5 years
5
ago.
years. You know, they close our one fishing hole in this county with a stroke of a pen, and it's become a biologist playground. So we need to do something as a board. If we need to get our Park and Rec Commission working on this for us, let's see what we can do to get this open again sooner than later. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I will support that, Supervisor Munsters. I think you're good point, and I'm back here taking notes, going back to my constituents and tell them about that idea.
Yeah, that is a very good idea. And Supervisor Barrios, you have anything?
I do, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Supervisor Munster. I think those are great ideas. I'd like to see us be proactive, just like we have been proactive with Clear Creek. I think probably the most disturbing thing for me at this point, and Dale, you told us how many, what steps need to be taken, but it really is about money. If we don't get the money to eradicate, we're going to sit on this thing another 10 years. It's been 5 years. We eradicate, it's going to be another 4 years just to monitor before they actually open it.
Up to 4 years.
And that's if we start today.
Yes.
If we start today. So you're already looking at 10 years, no matter how you slice it. So I like your aggressive approach, and I will support it 100%. And he can help us get the money through the appropriations. For the feds, $2.5 million is nothing. If we can state our case and have findings, how it's affecting us, we can probably get some.
And I'd be happy to take a trip to Washington
Okay.
on behalf of you.
Thank you.
Madam Supervisor, there is a broader issue with this. Part of the reason that it is not being made a priority is we are what's called a contractor to the federal government. There are a whole group of contractors like San Benito County Water District that operate USBR infrastructure on behalf of the USBR throughout the West. And like I told you, the cousin of the zebra mussel is what's called the quagga mussel, and they have infested the entire Colorado River system in Southern California. And if it would cost us $2.5 billion, or the USBR $2.5 billion, to perform the eradication here.
Million.
I'm sorry, 2.5 million, you're
Yeah,
correct.
million.
It would cost billions to perform an eradication on the Colorado River system. And the contractors down there are likely just waiting for the USBR to fund us, because then they're going to step up to the pulpit and they're going to want their share to perform eradication of the quagga mussels. So my belief is part of the reason the feds don't want to move forward, because if they have to move forward with us, they have to move forward with everyone that has a mussel infestation in the West.
There's such a difference, though, between millions and billions. 2.5 million for our little county. But I know that you make a good point, that it is all political.
Yes.
Well, I kind of I do support what Supervisor Munzer is saying. The Colorado River is a big, large area that is maybe, probably undoable. What we're looking at is a small, little localized pond, relatively speaking. That 2.5 million, eradicates a problem that really poses a risk to other water bodies in a brand new area. And I don't know why you wouldn't invest in the $2.5 million to eradicate it. And that's the logic I would use with the federal folks. And you know, my question is that we have completed all the environmental work that needs to be done to initiate the project. Is that a fair statement?
No.
Okay, because I had that impression from the director.
And we've completed FIFRA. The federal government, who is the owner, has not completed NEPA. They still have to go finalize the document and go through public review and finish that environmental document. After that, we are ready to start working on the next steps, which is coming up with contractual documents and trying to find the money through a congressional allocation.
Because it makes a lot of sense to get it done sooner than later, because we may not have any water next year. The San Justo Reservoir may have maybe a half capacity if we're lucky, maybe even less, and it's a smaller area to put potassium in. It might be a cheaper project. But is there anything that this board can do to push the federal government environmental work along, or is that what we should be emphasizing?
No, you know, just get it on their radar. Talk to your congressperson. Talk to the USBR area office in Fresno, which is the group that is hands-on. Their area manager is a gentleman named Michael Jackson.
I think we've met him before, actually, here. I want to say that he did a presentation somewhere to somebody to
Yeah, I've pushed this issue pretty hard. In fact, met with the director of the Western States out there, and he said he had all the resources to get this done, and that don't worry, we're going to get this project completed. And this was back in 2009.
Yeah,
it's pretty frustrating. Supervisor Munzer?
No, can we put on a future agenda fairly soon a resolution to Congressman Farr for asking for support on this to move the process forward?
If that's all right, with the pleasure of the board, I can make sure that happens.
Okay, great. At this point, I'll open it up for the public. Any public speakers? Mr. Thorney?
Ted Thoney, resident of San Juan Valley. A couple questions. Do we need Dale mentioned is drying it up. Do we need a permit to do that? The other thing is, if the clam is in the pipeline, is that pipeline supplying ag water to the valley? Because if it is, just a truck driving through the water would pick up the clams and transport the clams somewhere else. So I guess my question is, we need a permit to use potash, but Dale also mentioned just drying the thing up and drying out the pipeline. And if we do that, we may not even need a permit. Thank you.
Thank you. If you would like to answer that question.
Sure. To dry it up, the way the infrastructure was put together for the pipeline and the reservoir, it's very difficult to drain it past a certain point. There's a inherent dead pool in the reservoir, and then you would have to drain the pipeline completely. And where would you put the water? And the pipeline itself has 30 acre feet, so roughly, for the other board members, I'm sure Supervisor Botello, you know what the acre feet value is. An acre foot is approximately 300,000 gallons. It's basically, if you had 30 acres on 30 acre feet, it would be submerging 30 acres 1 foot deep. Well, there's about 10,000 acre feet worth of water when the system's at capacity. You know, they don't make a tank big enough. You'd almost need another reservoir to push the water into. So that's one problem. The other problem is, yes, it's a very real concern. You know, the mussels could be conveyed by way of ag irrigation water. Luckily, they're not going into any bodies of water. They're actually going onto the ground, and when they go onto the ground, they do dry out and die. So far, we've only seen shells coming out at various points in the pipeline.
So they're dying.
Well, yeah, serendipitously, we have two things working for us. Although we can't perform an eradication, we have been inherently performing control of them so that, as the picture shows, they can grow in a very short period of time. Well, two things we're doing that helps to control the population and keep it under control. The creatures need to breathe like everything else. And our reservoir at this time of year develops a dead zone with no oxygen at the bottom of the reservoir. And we've been trying to use this serendipitously to our advantage. We just got through with the 75-hour push of a slug of that, what we call the anoxic water, into the distribution system. And it kills approximately 90% of them because, like everything, they got to breathe. The other thing, for different reasons, we've been operating the reservoir. Up until 2009, the reservoir was operated with a steady elevation. We had plenty of water up until about 2008, 2009, but we're trying to be a little more frugal with the water, try to preserve what we have. And the more water you have in a reservoir, the more evapotranspiration occurs, more loss. If we store the water in San Luis Reservoir, we don't have to account for those losses. So we try to keep the water in San Luis as long as we can, and then in the, when the rains begin, we try to bring as much carryover water from the previous years into our reservoir, fill it all the way to the top, and then run it all the way down in November so that it's at its lowest point around November, December. By doing that, the creatures like a steady, they like to live in waters that have a steady elevation. They form what in a reservoir is a bathtub ring, about 30 feet below the surface. Well, if you're filling it all the way up and then you're running it all the way down, they don't have a chance to really establish themselves, and they desiccate out and dry. So those two things have really helped to control the population. DWR was doing some biotic work out there. They're actually the ones who did that test with the plates that you have before you. And at first they couldn't figure out why, and then they realized because we were doing all these these two control options, that it actually cut the reproduction rate, the reproduction density of the mussels down to 25% of what they'd seen previously. So we are making some progress, but it's not an eradication. It's not enough to allow us to reopen the reservoir.
Okay, any further public comment, Mr. Golf? Ted, ordinarily I just let one person have one shot, but Ted, I'll allow you to, and then that'll be.
I'm just wondering the size of the pipeline that's supplying it, that has the clam in it. Is there, it's going to cost money, but it might be cheaper than the potash, but would be to put a temporary line in, and so that you could dry out the line that's affected right now.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else from public? If not, I'll close the public comment period. Any further thoughts or comments from the board? If not, I think we could begin with that development of a resolution and agendize that.
Yeah.
And we could go from there, Supervisor Munzer?
Sounds good.
Okay.
Dale was going to answer the gentleman's question.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry, Dave.
The Hollister conduit is a 54-inch diameter, spiral wound steel pipeline that runs for approximately, I have to say, 17 miles. So the approximate cost, just off the top of my head, to build a parallel barrel for that would be about $100 million. So, I mean, we looked at this. The potash is really the way to go. You know, it's the cheapest option. It's highly species specific, and it won't harm humans or the environment or agriculture.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate I've already closed the public comment. I'm sorry, John. Maybe you could talk to the Water District gentleman after the item. Anyway, that concludes our report, and staff has direction as far as bringing back the item.
Yeah.
We have time, hopefully, to do another item, the grand jury report.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Dale, for coming over today and giving us the presentation. Yes, we have item number 18 on our agenda. This is going to be the review and approve of response to the grand jury, and Barbara, our assistant county counsel, is here to present this information. Thank you, Barbara.
Annually, the Board of Supervisors responds to the grand jury report. This year, the report has a more detailed response from the Board of Supervisors. The response from the Board of Supervisors, as well as from individual department heads that have to respond, the requirements of that is detailed in the penal code, but you either need to agree to the findings, disagree with the findings, and wholly or in part. And if you disagree, you must give an explanation or the reasons for the disagreement. As far as the recommendations, you have to indicate whether they've already been implemented, will be implemented at a time frame with a time frame for implementation in the future. If it needs further analysis, you must state the scope of the analysis and the time frame not to exceed 6 months for the analysis to be performed. Or if the recommendation will not be implemented, you have to indicate that it will not be implemented with an explanation about the reasons why it will not be, or why the agency did not feel that it was appropriate. The time frame for the responses, the sheriff and the department heads that will be responding need to send their response by September 30th. The board actually has another 30 days to respond, but in order to give the board the opportunity to review the responses that are being sent out by the appointed department heads, it was brought forward today so that the board could review the appointed department heads' responses. And if the board feels comfortable with the response that's been prepared on behalf of the Board of Supervisors, you could authorize that response, approve that response today, and authorize the staff to submit that response to the court. I should note that the Board of Supervisors' response has been separated into two parts. You're responding today, if the board approves it, to reports 2, 3, 10, and 11. The report regarding the items that are under the Sheriff's Department's control, the Sheriff Department and the jail, that's going to be brought back in October after we were waiting until the Sheriff has actually responded to the items. And then I'm going to incorporate the Board of Supervisors' response and bring it back in October. So if you don't have any, you could, if you have any questions regarding the proposed responses, or if you have any suggestions or changes, please let me know. Otherwise, it's here for the board's just suggestions and approval of the draft response.
Any comments, questions from the board? If not, any comments, questions from the public? Seeing none, bring it back to the board to, I guess, approve the response.
So moved.
Second?
All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Opposed? Hearing none. We'll move on to, thank you, Barbara. Next item.
Yeah, we have a next item is item number 19. I don't know the timing on it. Is there sufficient time for the presentation? Okay, good. So we have Enrique from our Health and Human Services Department. He is a deputy director there and is going to be presented to us the San Benito County Community Action Board presentation. So.
Thank you very much, members of the board and the public. Enrique Arriola, Deputy Director with Community Services and Workforce Development. Let me try to get this open. Where is it? Planning. Oh, it got moved over here. Is this the one? Okay, well, we're going to take a few minutes, hopefully no more than 10, to present the brief presentation on the Community Action Board. As you know, the Community Action Board is our local community action agency whose main purpose is to serve, to combat and address issues of poverty and help our low-income people. with different programs. So I wanted to present Hazel Winfrey White. She was the board chair for the last 2 years, and currently she's a board member that will be presenting the presentation. So I want to call Hazel Winfrey White. Where's slideshow? I don't want to mess things up.
Enrique, hang on a second.
Okay.
IT's coming.
IT.
Yeah, always one.
Yes, thanks very much. Thanks, Enrique. Mr. Chair, honorable members of the board, thank you for giving me the opportunity to present to you an update on the activities of the Community Action Board. It's been a very busy time for us, and we do really thank you for your support that you've given us through the years and at all times. So the Community Action Board, the purpose is to provide essentially an avenue to participate in government, private organizations, and private citizens of the community in serving the needs and disadvantaged members of the community. In so doing, the services that are provided through CSWD and workforce development would include PG&E utility assistance of propane to prevent shutoff, stop eviction assistance, first month's rental assistance is also included. Referrals from the following community organizations would include the Community Food Bank, Fishes and Loaves, Homeless Coalition, St. Vincent de Paul Clothing, Hazel's Thrift Store, Job Interview Clothing, among others. The San Benito Migrant Center is also supported in the following efforts. There are cabins for the family, migrant farm worker housing. There are about 67 cabins, roughly about 2 to 3 bedrooms, and is operated June through November season by the San Benito County Community Services and Workforce Development. Dormitory facilities are for unaccompanied adults, farm worker camp for unaccompanied adults. Capacity is about 268 beds. State-of-the-art industrial kitchen is also operated. Operated by the Farm Worker Labor Association, seasonal and year-round. WIB, the Workforce Investment Board, also comes under the heading of Community Action Board and CSWD. Services include services for job seekers, employers, on-the-job training, individual training account, and work expenses. The youth in our community is also included under the Youth Employment Program, YEP Council, and the Youth Work Experience. Now, interesting thing is, how are all these funds able to be dispensed? Well, there's a process, and the process has been very effective for us. CSWD and staff researches the grants, then applies the appropriate grants to eliminate services to our low-income community. Community Action Board is responsible for the selection of the funding organizations and oversight of the above various activities along those lines. CSWD funds enable services to be provided to much-needed communities which otherwise may not receive the proposed services without the CDBG funding and the CDBG funding process. Some examples come to mind as to the funding for the low income in San Benito County. Recently, we have had 500,000 CDBG grant for 2013, serving the Homeless Coalition San Benito County, Emmaus House, job training services. Over $7.2 million have been received since 1986. CSBG 2013, 252,000 to the Winter Shelter Administration, rental assistance, stop eviction assistance, water and garbage, and job training. 216,200, pardon me, low-income home energy assistance program for 2013. The HEAP portion and fast track portion also assistance for PG&E and propane utility. 207,960 continuum of care for 2012, offering permanent housing for homeless individuals or families that have documented disabilities. Program name is Helping Hands and is provided by the Homeless Coalition. $2 million Joe Cerner Farm Worker Grant for 2005, $2 million to be used for the new kitchen, additional bunk beds, office and manager apartments at the San Benito County Migrant Center. Community Action Board also helped greatly in the distribution of food, and the volunteers worked through the food bank for food distribution. And of course, homelessness has always been a factor that has plagued our community. And this is a photo from the freelancers taken in 2011, where the tents have been were showing up behind Jerry's restaurant. Now we don't see the tents, but we do still have an element of housing issues. Funding was provided for the construction of the Migrant Center, and lots of effort and planning went into the construction, organizing, and creation of the timeline, and Enrique was very much involved in that entire process. We finally saw the fulfillment of the construction of the Migrant Center. Here is an aerial view, and the ribbon cutting ceremony, some of our community members participated in that ceremony. Laundry facilities are provided. These are shots of the Migrant Center and its layout, and it's always kept clean. The CAB, members of the CAB usually like to take a tour of these various facilities and the other services that we provide to other groups within the community. And it's always a good thing because we are able to go out and meet some of the people who are actually involved in some of these activities. The Community Action Board members meet from time to time to host events for members of the homeless. Here is one evening we hosted a shelter Pozzoli night where members of the board cooked Pozzoli for the homeless, and they were able to have dinner. Of course, everybody participated. the homeless were able to have a wonderful dinner. We will be able to bring smiles to many faces. In addition to events at the shelter, the winter shelter sees visits every year from Santa, and the kids are extremely delighted when Santa shows up and able to provide presents for the children and their families. On the 19th annual Christmas party for 20 families were housed at the winter shelter that year, and we were able to provide for them a nice meal and presents, at least something special for the family at Christmas time. Volunteers are an extremely important part of this process. We're all volunteers, and it's really important because they take their time and effort to come out and support the community and support the efforts of the Community Action Board. Leadership in the community. The Community Action Board hosts, would be our second community leadership event. The first event last year was so successful. It gave the members of the community a chance to meet their leaders and an effort to provide local panel answers and questions from the audience, and a nice lunch was provided. The second, this event, by the way, is free, an open event, open to the public. You do have to RSVP though. The next one is held this week, Thursday, September 26th at 12 to 1:30 p.m. LDS Church, Cultural Hall, Seneca Road, here in Hollister. And our leadership panel would be our mayor and some other distinguished members of our community. And it's actually so important for people to be able to meet our community leaders and learn from their various experiences and understand exactly where we are here in Hollister, in our community and our support efforts. In addition to that, there is a program which is the Volunteer Income Tax Assistance Program. Last year, for the very first time, I participated in the VITA program, which is providing San Benito County families tax assistance with their tax return preparation. This is such a vital aspect of our community services. Many low-wage earning families may not have the means to have the opportunity to have their income tax prepared, and this is a way that the service that we can provide, we do provide for our low-income families. We do appreciate the fact that you support the Community Action Board in providing referrals to the board for people who who may want to join an organization like this and be a part of the community that would help support and create an impact and change lives of the citizens in Hollister and San Benito County as a whole. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? The only question I have, you had quite a few slides on the homeless portion as far as what support is given there. Are you working with the coalition at all as far as finding a permanent solution for the housing issue? Because eventually maybe that it's not a long-term solution having them at the migrant camp.
We all sit in our local homeless service providers, part of our continuum of care. We have not been in discussions with the Homeless Coalition regarding this new endeavor, but that is the ultimate goal, and I'm hoping that through the continuum of care, we assist in any way.
I think at the last board meeting, it was pretty much resolved that, we're going to recognize as a migrant labor camp, and it's be a migrant labor camp, but with the partnership that the homeless, coalition is work with the Farm Labor Association to accommodate homeless folks during the winter. I think that's a work fine for the short term, but, long term, there needs to be some other plan put together.
I agree with you, and the same goes for the families. CSWD operates the homeless shelter for families. We use the migrant center, the cabins, and I think, San Diego County lacks the resources, lacks short-term emergency shelter, transitional shelter, long-term shelter, so I think it is a big, big need.
Any other questions, comments? Any questions, comments from the public? Not, thank you
We
very
also encourage the clients to be able to, create other avenues of support for their effort, for their endeavors, and the events that they have going on. So it's something that we've always encouraged.
We have a terrific board, very, very committed, and I wanted to thank the entire board for all the contributions, and Hazel for taking the time today to be here. It took a little bit longer, and she managed to wait, and I appreciate that, and I appreciate Supervisor Robert Rivas sits on the board as a member and supporting us to come forth before the board.
It is a very good board. I'm happy that that was mentioned, Supervisor Barrios.
Mr. Chair, I just want to thank Hazel. I know you've been very patient. You've been here all morning, but it's your commitment and your volunteer, effort that makes this happen in San Benito County, along with all the others. So I know you do your hard work. So thank you for that, and please thank the other board members.
Thank you, and we will. I'll take that message back to the board.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thanks. We have two more items, but should we just continue till after lunch? And we might have closed session right after lunch. Maybe it's better to continue the two items to the next meeting? What's the consensus of the...
Mr. Chair, actually, yeah, there is really no urgency on those two items, so we could continue those if it's the pleasure of the board.
I would like to hear, I don't want to continue the one on South Side, because I think that that's a critical item that could bring us some potential revenue. And I know we need to give you direction. So I really don't want to put that off. I don't mind doing it right after lunch and then going into closed session.
Can we do it, maybe it makes sense to do that one item right now, break for lunch, and then have closed session?
Yeah, so currently we have scheduled for 1 o'clock the labor negotiations, so we have the attorneys that will be here at 1 o'clock. I think it would be okay if we push that back to 1:15 or 1:30. As far as agenda items number 20 and 21, one suggestion would be to start the 1 o'clock closed session as close to 1 o'clock as possible, do that, and then come back out and finish with the regular agenda, and then go back in the closed session.
Okay, that's what we'll do then. All right, thanks for the help. We'll break for lunch.
What time do you want us back?
1 o'clock. It has to be. It's 1 o'clock, yeah.
At least a half hour.
At least.
Maybe more.
Okay, Anthony, we'll see you at 1 o'clock, or as close to as possible.